Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Balanced Dataslate Day. I'm Innes. I am joined by Jeremy and Tim, and we are going to be going through a bunch of stuff about all of the new 40k rules, content, balanced updates, points updates, erratas, FAQs, everything that came out today. We're going to be going through a broad top level of what's in there, why it matters, what you should be paying attention for that you might not have caught in higher order. There should be links to everything available. We have a points update compilation with like all of the comparison from what's changed, thanks to Jeremy. There are Goonhammer articles that have like a summary of everything if you want to have just like a top read of it. Goal is to go through it and talk about why stuff matters more than like what's actually happened. So if there was something that happened that like isn't super important, like a unit went down 5 points, don't expect it to come up much. But broadly, if you're here to hear, if you want to hear about why things matter, what's changed that's interesting, we're here to talk about it. Jeremy, Tim, how are you feeling about the balance update?
Go ahead, Jeremy. Okay, I think broadly, below the probably S tier stuff, which would be, we were kind of hoping Necrons would get hit, but I think GW stuck to their guns of it being too early, and so they wanted to wait. And I think them plus one or two other factions we're going to talk about are going to be clearly a step above the rest. I think for everyone else, it's going to be really good. So I hate to draw comparisons to 10th edition launch, but the 10th edition launch, the general consensus was if you were playing like the C tier to like low A tier armies, like the games felt very good and very close to each other, and then it was just like as long as you weren't paired into like that top faction. I think we might see something similar to that.
Yeah, I'd agree. Necrons and Admech, they were fairly recent. I mean, these documents all have to be translated. The apps are all updated, so everything's live today. But it's very clear, and the MetaWatch video also made this clear. Like, it's a little bit too early, but we're sitting here with the knowledge of what happened at LVO and Nottingham. Going, is it though? Yeah. Aside from that, I broadly like the changes that we've read. I've had a little bit more time to digest them. The rules commentary stuff is where I really like what we're looking at.
There's so much cool stuff in the rules commentary and the index card erratas that's like not on top level stuff.
So many little minute things. They've cleaned up some of the biggest arguments that have been happening lately around ignore modifiers, around being set up, counting as having made a null move without actually making a null move. All of that has been cleaned up so nicely. So I really want to give a shout out to whoever it was on the GW rules FAQ teams. I don't know where it's all sitting. But yeah, they did a really good job with that. It's going to make my job as an event judge a lot easier.
Yeah, even just stuff like one-shot weapons for Gene Cults and transports getting cleaned up. There's so much good stuff. It's
all right. Shall we dive into it?
Yeah. Let's. So yeah, just to let everybody know, broad structure for this one, we're going to go through the 3 primary documents in order. So that is the rules commentary. We're going to go through that one first. Then we're going to go through the points updates. Then we're going to go through the actual balance data slate itself. We will probably have a small discussion in there somewhere about the new Drakari up detachment. Although I think Anthony on the main show tonight will have a lot more to say about that as the primary Drakari player from our group of people. There will be a lot of stuff we don't touch on because there's some stuff that's small impact, some stuff that's not super important. If it gets missed, if you missed your bet on your faction, go back and watch it. Come back and listen to the main show tonight. We'll have even more on all of this. We are also to touch. Probably not going to be taking a ton of questions from chat because we want to get through the piles of content that's here. We will take some of the most interesting questions and any super chats at the end, but that is it. So let's move into Jeremy's favorite document of all time, the rules commentary. Jeremy, do you want to run us through
it? Neil Kerr, rules commentary. GW relenting to Calvin, relentlessly being German, loving Z rules too much. Possibly. There's definitely a taste of him in here. So this is version 1.2. There's also a core rules errata 1.0 that's included in this. I'm going to speed through the changes. We can talk about them as we're kind of going through here. But broadly, what we're looking at here is a lot of cleanup, along with a handful of changes or tweaks from things that we saw initially in the World Championships of Warhammer FAQ that was that myself and Innes had to play under back in November. So very first entry, and I love this one because this one actually goes against a lot of people's 40k common understanding because of how things have worked in the past. Abilities with the same name can affect units multiple times, unless they apply a named condition. So, for example, Night Spinners give the pinned condition or something like that. I think that might actually be basilisks. One of the artillery pieces give the pinned condition, so you can't stack that. And auras were already explicitly stated to not be stacking in the core rules, but this means that things like Fields of Fire from Guard, you can, hit one guy with a mortar, spend your 2 CP, hit another guy with a mortar, use Creed's free strat ability, and now everything shooting at that thing has +2 AP. This is a big buff to them.
Personal favorite: 3 applications of the Ren Master on Bloodthorns' buff.
Yes.
For +1 strength, AP, and damage on from core units charging. You can
just
get
send a unit of Bloodletter sending a Titan into.
And you can get Flesh Hounds to 8/4/4.
It's very nice, especially because I think a lot of people are going to be teching for ways to deal with Satan, and it's kind of nice because you put a unit of Bloodletters into it with Skull Taker, and it's like, okay, my damage 1 is halved to 1, but then
I add 3.
Then I add 3, so every failed save, is 4 damage. Or with Skull Taker, you're taking a bunch of dev wounds.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's gonna be great. I'm very, very excited for this change in terms of a bunch of abilities that just have.
And it's a nice little, very clean change too, because there was that gap where in 9th and 8th, just same name stuff in Denver stacked.
Just anytime
that rule just disappeared, so people were like, "Does it work?"
Anytime GW steps into the void and just shuts down what's been a common but arduous argument for the last 2-3 months is always good, because no matter how much there's a general consensus, there will always be those holdouts that will just be like, well, clearly it says it this way. And I'm like, no, obviously it doesn't clearly say it that way. Otherwise there wouldn't be we wouldn't all be arguing about it for the past 3 months.
Yep. And then similarly, so then the next one, which is kind of in the same vein, most of these things in the commentary are in this vein. Adding models to a unit, they've now added a carve out, because you always have to set up models in coherency with things that started on the table in that phase. Then Hypercrypt came along and have a strat that reactivates the reanimation protocols in reserves. You can't set up in coherency in reserves, so it just wouldn't work. Aside from just restoring wounds to wounded stuff. They've now added a carve out where if it's off the battlefield, it now just works. So that means that the Hypercrypt strat, Grey Knight's Brotherhood Apothecary, GSC icons all work off the table to add models back to the unit.
Even stuff theoretically, you can use the Tyrannid stratagem for Endless Swarm for a unit that's in reserve for some reason.
Yep, because there's nothing that prevents you from targeting stuff off the board with stratagems.
Yeah, or more relevantly, probably the Custodes stratagem with Alaris Terminators would probably be the biggest one.
Ooh, yeah.
You go up into reserve with the squad at the end of your opponent's turn, heal them in the command phase, bring them down at full strength.
Yeah, no, that's good. So there's a lot of buffs around this, and
it's a very small change in the sense that it doesn't give you you come down, you set them up, and you you heal additional models closer. For some of them it will, Union Circle icons. If you set up on the board, you can now bring models back out of coherency for a shorter charge from a 9-inch, for example. So there are lots of places that it does have a lot of impact. It's a very, very big change. Call icons being, I think, probably the biggest one, because it's just every datasheet in that army basically has them, and it goes into reserve twice a game, it feels like. So
yeah, if you're bouncing constantly with GSC, it's huge. Grey Knights, it actually means the Apothecary does something, because that unit was almost always wounded when it was pulled back off the board. So, so let's get into the next big one. Actually, no, this is a small one, but it's basically arriving from strategic reserves in the first battle round. All this changes does is it makes it so those abilities are explicitly defined as to how they work. Because when things are said, you can be just set up in turn 1 regardless of any rules. You had nowhere to technically be placed unless you had Deep Strike.
Or if you're a unit that went off the board during your opponent's turn 1, you can now come back on.
Yes. And so basically all it does now is it says to treat the battle round as 1 higher than it currently is, but only in the first battle round.
Yeah.
So it means that you can now come anywhere outside of your opponent's deployment zone, 6 inches off a board edge, or anywhere if you have the Deep Strike ability.
Yeah, it gives something like Votan that have you can play a bunch of Pioneers, and now if you go first, you have a scout move for a lot of power forward.
No, actually, because that ability specifically doesn't allow you to be set up in the reinforcement step of your first, second.
It does though, right? Because it allows you would be in reserve
puts you into strategic reserves
next turn. That's fair.
Yeah,
So it doesn't
maybe
do a ton for
the
them.
bigger
just
thing
like
is
Night Scythe would be like
the
one of
Night Scythe now works. That's
Night
the
Scythe
big
works,
one.
Yeah, well, that helps.
Yeah, cult icons are end of movement, but it does mean that if they're in reserve, still you can use it.
Well, the problem with the cult icon was that you would set up and you didn't have any models that were on the board at the start of the phase in
They
order
still
to be
work
set
that
up
way.
from. Well, now they work just generally, right? Because
The
it just
carve
says
out
it
is only
works,
for
right?
stuff that's off the table.
That sucks.
Yeah.
So you'd have to leave them off the table. That's a really weird.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work when they're on their own. So it's just if they're off for an extra turn buff. It's a bigger impact for Hypercrypt and GK, and as you said, Custodes. Next one, this is a minor change. This is more of a clarification than for any reason. Battle shock tests. If anything specified that you had to take a battle shock for a case in the battle shock subphase, that only means you take one. It doesn't mean you take two. So sorry, Tim, your Chaos Knights are now directly saying no, you don't take two if you're below starting.
I never played it that way. That was
and most people said that you only took one.
It was a very tortured way to read that rule.
Yeah. So they've just now explicitly called it out that you would only ever need to take one. Obviously, but that's only during the Battle Shock subphase. So there is still the caveat. Yeah. Well, no, because you still don't do that during the Battle Shock subphase.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
you do that during the command phase, which is the section right before it.
Yeah. Also, battle shocked units that die while battle shocked still count as being battle shocked for the purpose of like reinforcement stratagems.
Yeah, that one was a weird one because I think that one didn't really do it. Someone came up with a really hilarious interaction of what happens if Angron dies while battle shocked. Can you then not rapid ingress him?
Awkward.
We have bigger problems with Angron right now, anyways, as we'll get to. The next one was charging. It was just a real quick clarification. This one thing was fairly well understood, but every now and then it would come up. The charge bonus that is now specifically defined as just the thing that gives you fight first. And then they say you get everything else from having made a charge move. So you get Lance, you get any other abilities like the Blood Crushers, Mortals on the charge, all of that.
Don't get Heroic Die by Blood Crushers.
Heroic Die by Blood Crushers does sound very funny. And it also counts as you having made a charge move, which then means that you are eligible to fight. All right. After that, okay. This is the really big. This is one of the two big ones where there's a kind of a series of clarifications and tweaks, and I'm going to lump them all together because they're spread across 20 pages. But basically, they've tweaked how objective control works now, very slightly, and the nuance was lost on me at first, actually. But basically, they've added a line that says, so it used to be that you control an objective marker at the end of any phase or turn. Sorry, it used to be just phase. They've now added or turn because the end of a phase isn't the same as the end of a turn.
It was the other way around. The objective, sticky objectives was start.
This is just for all. No,
this is for all
sticky objectives. Criteria turn. This now adds turn in addition to.
Yeah, so control just now added the turn characteristic.
Gotcha.
So one of the things that this changes actually is it means that you can now cleanse an objective you just created for ritual.
Nice.
Which you couldn't do. Well, you could at WCW, but now you can do it even at WTC.
And now objective control is also checked before all victory points are scored. So there's no like argument over, well, you didn't have it's my turn.
It's my turn, so I choose the order kind of thing. No.
Yeah. Which is how WTC ruled it, which is why they had it not working that way. But now that they've added a turn criteria, now everything actually works together now.
I'll add into that the section where basically there's they call this objective secured as the overall rule. But basically it's any of the rules that said this is a sticky objective. We often refer to them as sticky objectives. The change is actually a broad change. It's now if you control it at the end of any phase, the sticky objective stops.
Yep. Slight nerf to Death Guard, because before, if your opponent was like pushing into you, and then let's say you were going to interrupt, or there's a fight first squad, and your squad was on objective, and you were going to use some of your strats like the extra AP or the sustained hits. Those had riders if you were on the sticky objective that you control, so you lose a little bit of power there. Also, they can just move onto the objective, unsticky it, and then charge off of it, and so that they can kind of steal that objective without like really committing to it. That's So it's a slight nerf to Death Guard, but I think some of the stuff is going to be a little bit fringe.
Yeah. The next big, so that's that. There's
Elias raises a good point with that one as well, is that you can't use Sticky now to deny Canoptic Court and demons from getting their half objective control in No Man's Land, because it now will check at the end of the phase, so you can turn on
that's a good one.
Canoptic Court rerolls during mid. So that's a really good shout out by Elias, by Humanity there.
Yeah, it's a good one. So there's I think 7 entries in the commentary here that I found that all just tweak that thing, because contested would also changed it. Control, but it's basically all adding the turn characteristic into there, and then the sticky one just got the broad change of now it also checks phase. Just a generally good cleanup. That was a small miss on the rules team back when the edition was first created. That carve out on end of turn and end of phase isn't the same time. But yeah, that's all the big one. That's a big change, but also not a hugely impactful one for most people. This is the one that caused the most discussion ever since WCW, though, that's upcoming, which is counts as having made a normal move. They've now basically carved out your own type, a different type of move here, where it's just basically being set up. So if you come down and you count as having made a normal move, you can't move further, but for the purposes of rules that are triggered by that, nothing happens.
So the use case here basically is if you disembark from a transport that's moved, or you disembark from a transport and don't move further yourself, or you set up from deep strike, whether that's by a 3-inch deep strike or strat reserve or whatever, your opponent won't be able to use strategies like squad tactics, like the Canoptic Court reactive move, anything like that. You cannot now, even like stuff like Eldar Rangers using their D6 move ability when someone is within 9 of them. None of those work now because you don't count as having made a normal. You didn't make a normal move. You just count as having made one, which is not the same for the purposes of that ability.
Correct.
So you can't.
So you still don't count as remaining stationary or anything like that, because that's a separate thing that you do. So it won't trigger like heavy or whatnot, but it does mean that, reactive moves don't work. I did see some commentary earlier, people saying, oh, I can't Overwatch stuff that disembarks. That's not true, because Overwatch also says set up, and you do count as having been set up when you disembark.
But you wouldn't be able to, for example, move away from demo charging Acolyte Squad that's 3-inch deep strike can help you anymore.
Yep. Or no, you would. Never mind. I was going to say a truck that moves and disembarks, but they're 6-inch range, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you could
Truck
wait
has to
for
be
them
outside of
to
9, and then
you could
they
drive
just
the truck up really close to them, make them burn it there, and then if they don't burn it, then you can at least get out knowing where they are, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there are situations. It's definitely got its own situational use cases.
Yeah.
The other one, deep striking doesn't deny call ambush tokens. Now, which is a very, very big change. So you now have to actually move next to a call ambush token. You'll still stop them setting up right next to you. But you can't.
But it does mean if you then clear them without them having an opportunity to move, that you're safe.
Yeah, you can still block the deep strike ability from call ambush because you have to set up outside enemy models. But you could come out like the other side of it now, for example, if they're not right on top of it. So it's still limited, but a little less counterplay to it now.
They don't have to make a normal move. They just can't remain stationary. They count as having made a normal move, but they haven't made a normal move, because also they're just set up there.
Yeah, you've made a normal move, but you just haven't used your full.
You don't count as having made a normal move if the transport hasn't moved.
Yeah.
You can't get out of a transport, not move further, and remain stationary. So you count as having made a normal. You're still eligible to move further.
Yeah. You just can never count as remaining stationary. Yeah. That's all. Now, coupled with this, and this is kind of a fun one, is they've added in another thing where it comes from embarked units and reserves, because this kind of played together where, okay, if I don't count as this, can I disembark after the transport has moved? And the answer is yes. So if you have a unit that is embarked in reserves and the transport comes in from reserves, you can then immediately disembark. However, you have to be at least 9 inches horizontally from any enemy units. And this carve out is for 2 things. 1, 18-inch melter weapons. And 2, Land Raider assault ramps.
And the new Dark Elder stratagem when we get to that.
Yes, but the Land Raider assault ramp was the one that's caused consternation amongst TOs for months now, where it's like, well, they can come in from strat reserves with a Land Raider, 6
a Crusader,
and I have a 6-inch charge with the thing that was in the Land Raider. It's like, yeah, but you would probably just do that anyways. So,
Star turn CP now count towards your 1 CP per battle round limit. Unsurprising.
Yeah.
D6 plus 1 damage on. So if you have like a D6 plus 1 damage weapon, like a las cannon, the plus 1 is not a modifier, so it is affected by half damage abilities. I don't think anybody's surprised at that. If you have an ability that says do not make an advance roll, you still count as making an advance, but you can't also roll. I don't know who was trying to do that.
So that's a mix of Necron and Orc players.
All of the worst
Necrons had a new enhancement in one of their detachments that allowed you to just flat advance 6 instead of rolling, and then the Translocator Overlord also allowed you to do that. So I can add 12 to my movement instead of advancing.
Yeah.
No.
Shove off. Multi-model character units. You have to pick one character to have the enhancement. They don't all get it. I don't know who is trying that one. Have they gotten rid of the thing where you can technically give Makari an enhancement yet? That's a complete side note, but
I think he has the Epic Hero keyword.
he does not. Gazgul does. He does not.
Hilarious. I guess technically you could, but don't do that.
A very interesting one here with Fight on Death. All Fight on Deaths are now resolved simultaneously if they come from the same activation, which means that there's less shenanigans with like, oh, I killed the first model, so then he piles in and fights, and then the next model piles in. You just roll them all at once, and then you can just fight with all.
It also means that for things like Sisters, where you get the bonus for being below or half or below starting, those all trigger because you check the criteria when you activate all of the guys that are fighting.
So it speeds up a lot of stuff with like the shenanigan and Fight on Death. Broadly, there was like a little bit of nuance you could use here with the Fight on Death, where you could like, kill some models so that the other ones couldn't pile in and fight through. That's all gone now. Don't worry about it. It never came up. It was stupid when it did, and you would just have to explain it to your opponent a bunch, and it's much simpler this way. Hazardous checks, you have to put the damage onto one model at a time now, I think is broadly the sequence.
Basically what they did, and this is the same carve out that we saw at WC. God damn it, Draki. Now I'm going to say that every single time I'm doing. This is the same rules clarification that they gave us at WCW, basically preventing Tau players from being like, so I saved 5 hazardous tests on a 6-man crisis unit. That crisis suit takes 3, that crisis suit takes 3, that crisis suit takes 3, and my commander takes 3. It's not how it's supposed to work. It's not ever how it was intended to work. And so as a result, what the goal behind that is, if you start taking mortals on something, you keep taking mortals on it. Now, Charles S. Do you see its impact on their Fight on Death? No, because they're not selected to fight. Everything still happens at the same time, but the unit has never been selected to fight. So you can't use stratagems that require them to be selected to fight, and you can't use abilities that activate when they are selected to fight. It's just ironing out the timing for individual models. But basically, and the other thing that they've also added here, and this I actually found interesting, there's 2 also minor tweaks that were added here. One was that if you had initially selected a character and there were mortal wounds left over after the character died, those mortal wounds go on the bodyguard squad.
Which makes sense.
It does, but it's a weird interaction with like Marines with plasma. Where if you have a 4-wound librarian with a hazardous shot and he's leading Hellblasters and they all fail their hazardous tests, and you start on the librarian, you allocate 2, you then kill an additional guy.
I like the idea of a Primaris Psyker on 1 wound blowing up so hard she takes 2 dudes with her.
That's a good one. The other thing that was added here, and this was an interesting one, is that you can select any model equipped with a hazardous weapon to suffer the effects of that failed test. It does not have to be a character, even if that character was the only model that attacked with a hazardous weapon. But this only applies for character units.
Fair enough. It's an interesting one because it definitely didn't work that way before.
It definitely did not work that way before.
Fair enough.
So it's a weird one. But
because it means you can like overwatch your, if you like were just like split firing the Tau commander at a different target and you didn't feel the need because he like hits a little better and you didn't feel the need to overcharge the regular guys, you could still not have to kill your commander if you roll like double ones.
You could choose to not shoot you could shoot the regular guys at their regular profile, overcharge the commander, and then take wounds on them. Niche case, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like worst came to worst, you just overcharged one guy's gun and then he could take the damage beforehand. But
yeah, next thing is objective secured. We already talked about that.
You can never fire one-shot weapons with firing deck.
Oh yeah.
Which
screw you, GSC players.
Do you know what? fine, fair enough. It was a weird nuance.
Do we want to talk about the fight on death?
We talked
Or are we
about the
skipping
phone.
ahead? Oh, I missed it. Zoned out. That's yeah, it's pretty nice little buff for sisters.
Yeah, it definitely helps. Redeploys. So if you have infiltrators now, when you redeploy, you can use it, which is a very nice buff for exactly and only Vanguard Marines and a tiny bit for Vanguard Nids and a
Well,
tiny bit for GSC.
It's a buff to every army with infiltrators because you can block and then redeploy before the roll off to keep, like, if your opponent has infiltrators themselves, you can be like, all right, these infiltrators can't bother me because I got the defender roll. And then when we finish off, I'm going to redeploy back.
Yeah.
However,
there's not a ton of armies that have like a lot of source of that. Like there's a few armies that like incidentally have it, like Leontis in Guard.
The caveat to this is that your opponent can then also do the same thing if they have a redeploy.
Exactly. So there's like it'll come up occasionally. The big like for GSE, it's nice. You can also like do that and then redeploy to a safer position, even if you go to first. The main one here though is Vanguard Tyranids, where you have the redeploy that happens after the turn roll. You can set up some very, very aggressive turn one plays and then double down or back up, but to respond to like move to like a safer but still advanced deployed position now, where before you would have to go back to your deployment zone. So if you put like 18-1 Ryan's Leapers on the line, 9 away from your opponent to go first, and then you were to win the roll off or lose the roll off and then go second, you could redeploy them, but you can only put them in your deployment zone. Now you can put them in other safe no man's land spots to still maintain some pressure. So that list like stays pretty good going first, but has a lot more fallback case for going second now, which is sort of like the kind of thing that a high heavy pressure army like that needs is, what happens if I don't go first? It's always a very viable question to ask Vanguard Marines or Vanguard Nids. I will never not get that wrong the first time, whichever one I'm speaking about.
I think the next new entry or updated entry is on splitting units. I
think that's exactly the same one as the last one.
No, this is new. Basically, what this does is it prevents you from further splitting. This entry
that was definitely because that came out from WTC. That we definitely already had that one. That was not new.
Yeah, WTC had that, but
no, this was out for WTC. Like we had this update by then.
I don't think so.
Pretty sure.
Well, let me pull it up while we continue to talk.
Vehicles with bases, they basically added some stipulations for the disembarking transport models from them, in that you can measure from like the base or the hull now for your disembarks and 5-inch vertical to the transport. It mostly seems like it's because Storm Ravens have showed up, and disembarking your Redemptor from one is the strangest thing you can do in a game of 40k now. The rules for that are very odd because it's too large to disembark, and it's very odd. Nothing super nuanced in there. And I think that's mostly it for the commentary, besides the modifiers change.
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah. I think that's it for the commentary until we get to the modifiers change now, right?
Vehicles with bases, did you mention that?
Yeah, just
okay, beautiful. Sorry, my brain doing its usual thing. Yeah, ignoring modifiers is the last entry in there, and vindication is all I have to say. Basically, I no longer have to explain to players that, yes, it ignores this modifier, but not this. If a datasheet ability says that this unit ignores its characteristics, either models characteristics or units characteristics or whatever, if it's on the datasheet, you ignore it. So can't modify, and it actually gives you the full list here. Move, toughness, save, wounds, leadership, objective control, range, attacks, ballistic skill, weapon skill, strength, armor penetration, and damage. So Mortarion stonks up. Trajan stonks up. Grim Demeanor stonks up. Ironstorm stonks up. Sisters stonks up. A whole lot of sources of it in the game now.
Yeah. This is a really nice windfall to kind of bring the gap back closer with Necrons being unchanged, is now that there's more viable options to make sure that you push damage through into them.
Yep. Now, if your ability doesn't see characteristics, it just says rules or tests, which I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I'm sure somebody will. It affects like advanced rolls, wound rolls, hit rolls, damage rolls. So you'd be immune to like hit roll modifiers, but you wouldn't be immune to like having damage. Your damage roll couldn't be modified, but the damage characteristic could. Is kind of the difference.
I think most of the examples of that dictate which kinds of rolls they do. Like Deathwing Terminators ignore ballistic skill, weapon skill, and hit roll modifiers. I don't know what else. And then the entry on the very bottom just basically reminds you that if it says any or all, you can choose to keep the good things and lose the bad things.
Yep. And then there's two small updates to the core rules FAQ for command reroll and rapid ingress that basically just say these stratagems actually work the way you think they should, which is the command reroll actually targets the unit now, in the sense that you Can't use it if you're battle shocked, which was a weird argument to begin with because you technically targeted the role, not the unit, and you can use it the free strat from Rights of Battle and such like that from Space Marine captains on it because it is a battle tactic and it targets the unit. And Rapid Ingress, you can use Deep Strike as if it was an out of phase roll, even though it says that you shouldn't, you theoretically shouldn't be able
it
to.
specifically says even though it is not your movement phase.
Yeah,
so that's the wording that you should look for whenever you're looking for an out of phase roll actually working, is that.
Yeah, good old UKTC give everybody a heart attack as we found out about that rule. It was an interesting period of the game. So yeah, I think that's broadly it for the rules commentary. I don't think there's anything in there that was like earth shattering. There's some quality of life changes in there, some things that definitely tweak things around a bit. Some formats we're already playing, like Grim Demeanor is working against half damage, like WTC, for example. Having that clarification so we're all playing a much more similar game is only going to be for the benefit.
Yep. Makes my job as a judge so much
Now,
easier.
the reason we went through that first is so that when we refer to stuff as we're going forward, anything that relates back to that, we don't have to go through like individually for each unit now.
Yeah,
so
provides a lot of context.
Yeah. So now we're going to go into the points updates because broadly they are many and plentiful. I'm going to share a link to Jeremy's spreadsheet, which has a collation of all of the current points and their like what's changed. We're going to just go through this faction by faction and talk about the super interesting stuff. If a unit changed by 5 and we don't mention it, assume it's because the unit sucks.
Lucas are right. Yes, Melta still gets applied after damage modifiers. Well, because it is a damage modifier, so it's not after modifiers; it's part of them. So it follows the sequence of division, multiplication, addition, subtraction.
Melta's still really good at killing Catan.
Yep.
Especially War Dog ones.
For sure. Right, Jeremy. Let's start off Space Marines. So what's changed here? Because there's a lot of issues. This is the reason that it's like 300 lines long.
Yeah. There's so we're going to talk about all Space Marines together, but basically, Dark Angels I pretend don't exist because they still have all of the entries from the index, not from their supplement. So they're fake as far as I'm concerned. But the line went down 30 points. Cool. Blood Angels unchanged. Space Wolves unchanged. Death Watch unchanged, and then Black Templars 3 small tweaks. Helbrecht went up 25, Grimaldus went up 25, and Firstborn Crusaders went up 10 for 5.
Yeah, which is
and then the other weird configurations of them basically went up a little bit as well, but so those are the non-codex compliant stuff. And then if you want to know what it went up points wise in Marines, if it was in John Lennon's Vanguard list from the World Champs, it went up. Aggressors went up 10 points for 3. Centurion Devastators went up 10 points for 3. Scouts went up 10 points for 5. And then the
Inceptors went up 20.
The Inceptors went up 20 for 3.
Yeah. And then on top of that, the kind of like Ironstorm Core of Redemptors and Whirlwinds went up 10 for Redemptors and 35 for Whirlwinds. And part of a general increase for almost all right in the game in general. I don't think there's anything in here that kills Space Marines. It definitely makes like sort of the Ultramarines Vanguard list look a little less appealing. Losing like 100 or so points on that is not negligible. If you're playing 15 Inceptors, your list just lost 100 points, which fine, right? Like that's good. That unit was stupidly undercosted, but
yeah. And then there were a handful of small reductions. Intercessors, heavy intercessors, assault intercessors all went down 5 points. Infernus went down 5 points.
Your terrible outrider list. You can now run so many terrible outriders.
They went down. Outriders went down 15 points for 3. Let's go. And I think that's it. Yeah, because I'm ignoring the Deathwing changes and Ravenwing changes. There was a broad decrease in the Dark Angel stuff, but
yeah,
until we see sort of the full releases, whatever.
Sorry. Immediate thoughts on Space Marines is that Black Templars made out like bandits here. Sword Brethren not going up was not unexpected, but fine. Helbrecht went up to a very reasonable points amount. That model is very high damaging, and 120 is much more reasonable for him. But you'll still see stuff like the 120 per Mars Crusaders list didn't basically change at all. Black Templars Ironstorm saw almost nothing. Like you'll lose a scoring unit now, kind of thing, or you'll cut one vehicle. There's lots of things that you can do with Marines still. I think hitting the scoring core is a little worrying.
I really like the concept of exploring a Ultramarines Ironstorm list because Gilliman actually looks like legit now. I really like. I've kind of tossed this around with John Lennon before and Jack about possibly subbing, and this is before the slate, subbing Vindicators for Redemptors because they push. You can't really shut down their shooting. But with the Iron Storm ignore modifier strat, there is some real play there. Having D6 plus 3 shots with D6 damage, you just ignore modifiers. So I think there's definitely some room to explore and pivot.
Yeah, the Iron Storm strategy is a little awkward because it requires your opponent to contribute. Like you have to have taken damage to use it, so it's a little bit unreliable in that sense.
Sure.
But it is a battle tactic, which means with Golemon you can use it twice, which is quite funny. Same with Mercy's weakness. I've definitely had a bit of a play with like Ultramarines and Iron Storm in the past because you can do things like double Armor of Contempt and then double Mercy's weakness with like, Storm Ravens, Vindicators, whatever, dealer's choice.
Glass is half full, glass is half empty. Like, yeah, your opponent has like a little bit of agency with some of that strats, but also on the flip side, the glass is half full side, they have to. It's just one more thing they got to keep track of.
Here's the real gimmick, though. Just lose one of your vehicles and use your all explode stratagem to do damage to everybody, so you can use your normal ones.
That's kind of what I was going to get at. Like if something explodes, or someone takes chip damage, or something like with firing deck, or sorry, with like plasma, it gets burned, or anything like that. There's just multiple ways as the game happens where you're just going to take some chip damage.
Yep. Right. Next up, Admech.
Missing in action.
Poor Admech.
Also, I apologize for the order on these. This spreadsheet was created for me at the beginning of the edition, so it has my armies up front, and then it goes to alphabetical order.
I mean, it's basically alphabetical order.
Yeah,
right?
it's very close to it. You guys just get to suffer through that part of it.
Okay, Adeptus Sororitas. Jeremy, run us through the interesting stuff here.
Sisters is actually kind of interesting.
They carved out some nuance for them.
Arcoflagellants went up 20 for 10. Dominions went down 10 for 10. Exorcists went up 20 points each. Morven Vol went up 20 points, but Paragon Warsuits went down 30 for 3. So the Vol-Gon combo is 10 points cheaper than it was before. Repentia went down 10. They're now 55 points for 5 Repentia. Retributors went down 10 for 5, and Zephyrin went down 10 for 5. So it's mostly an internal balance. They hit the worst offenders in the army, which were the Exorcists and the Arcos, in terms of just being undercosted. Well, the Arcos were just undercosted. Exorcists just caught it because indirect. If we can't fix the mechanic, let's just make it so no one takes them.
Zephyrim are really cheap now.
60 points for Zephyrim for an Action Monkey unit, or even just a unit that sits like right on your deployment zone and says, "Go in there, I dare you. I'll punch you with a whole bunch of swords."
Has reroll charges with Miracle Dice and can tag onto objectives, and like for 60 points, like it's hard to complain.
Yeah, I think I swapped my Seraphim in my sister's list for Zephyrim. And I still think I take 30 Arcoflagellants, because even at 150 points for 10, that unit is hilarious.
Especially with the Fun Death changes.
Yes. That unit with +1 to hit and +1 to wound on Fun Death. Yeah.
Your opponent kills the whole squad, and it's like, oh no, you have made a mistake.
Pain Celestine, plot twist. Sisters were cutting exos anyways. I like them for the keeping my opponent honest behind walls, but really that's what most
I like one.
did pretty well.
One is fine.
I think I dropped 1, and then the list that I was gaining has another like 80 points to play around with.
Yep. Astra Militarum, Mana Cores went up 30 points. This was the only change. I think this was fine. Guard are in a reasonably healthy spot right now. The Mana Core was undercosted, and I think this is all right.
Imperial Knights. Everything went down except for Warglaves the Gallant. Halvern went down 10, and all of the big boys went down by basically what they got increased by when we had the towering emergency points.
15 to 75 points for them, which
the Asterius going down 75 points seems like a lot, and then you realize, it's only like 8% of its cost.
Yeah, you're still never going to see that model.
Halvern's down 135 is beautiful.
Yeah, Canis becomes a very interesting ally option to 435. The sort of like general state of you can run like 2 big knights and a lot of small knights now pretty reasonably. Like it with the way that the bracketing works out for that AI kind of like either gets you an extra Halverin or like 2 Imperial Agent scoring units. Sort of like dealer's choice between like henchman or an assassin or that kind of thing, which is the kind of thing that makes Imperial Knights a little less flippy to play, right? Because you can actually hold objectives without having to commit a big knight and all that sort of thing. When we combine that with the balanced Dataslate small buff that they got, there's definitely a little bit more room in there for Imperial Knights. I don't think it makes these guys like hitting the top tables anytime soon, but I think if you were a really good knight player, there's a lot more room in there for you to do cool and interesting things with the faction.
Yeah. It's a targeted buff to Brian Jones from Team USA.
Yeah, actually, I think he gains. I think he can swap an agent for an Armiger now with those point changes to his list.
It's pretty reasonable.
All right.
Custodes.
They don't exist. Moving on.
I
So
think
Custodian Guard came down. Custodian Guard and Custodian Wardens both came down 20. Virtus Praetors came down 10 for 2. I think that means they came down 5 for 1, basically. So if you run the
basically
3 model
all of
squad,
the regular plastic non-character models came down 5 points a model.
yeah, and except the Shield Captain on Donegal Jetbike, who came down 40 and still might suck. But
Yeah, 140. I mean, it's now 290 for him and 2 jet bikes to run around.
look, he's more expensive than Fuegan.
We can't make that comparison. We
We
know
can,
that.
because he didn't change, so he's clearly incredibly balanced.
Yeah. But yeah, basically, Custodies, they rolled back the point increases that they got on their infantry, just didn't roll back the point increases on their characters.
Yeah, which seems fine. Again, Custodian's got a small buff, a small to middling buff in the data slate as well. So we'll get around to talking about them a little more with a bit more context, but Custodians seem okay.
Mhm.
Eldar.
Night Sprinters went up 30 points. Wraithguard went up 20 points for 5.
This doesn't sound a lot.
Eldar got gut punch in other ways.
Until we get to the not to bury the lead, but when we get to the actual data slate, the lack of changes here I think will make more sense.
Yeah.
Eldar got broad spectrum rules changes that will, I think, compensate for this. The only models that I'm like, I think maybe could have standard for a little more of an increase were the stuff that wasn't super reliant on some of the stuff that changed, like War Spiders and Fuegan.
Yeah, I was specifically
Fuegan specifically. War Spiders were already quite expensive for what you got.
I don't know if
I don't know if I agree with that. They have pretty much every single USR possible on their weapon.
They're not twin linked.
Depends what event you play in.
Oh, all right. Demons. Timmy.
Oh god. Sorry, I was looking at Space Marines. Basically, everything Nurglings and the Blue Scribes went up. I'm stalling while I scroll, and then almost everything else went down. Crushers, Letters, Bloodmasters down. Changecaster, Epitome down. Demonettes, Epitomeus, Exalted Flamer, Fiends, Flamers all down. Great and Clean One down. Infernal Raptures down. Kairos down. Karanak Keeper down. Plague Bearers, Poxbringer, Rodigus, Screamers down. Seekers, Secret Chariot, Scarbrand down. Skullmaster, Skull Taker, Soul Grinder, anything else with the word Skull, Spoilpox, Scrivener, and Master Slash all down. The enhancements stay the same.
Master down 20. Master 20 is nice as a loan up option. I think that the biggest ones here are Scarbrand, Rodigus, the Keeper Secrets of the Great and Clean One, going down 30 to 40 points just each.
I think
so much.
A Keeper for 290 is wild.
290 with a 5 field. They still can't kill anything tougher than toughness 8, but they rip through anything smaller than that.
Scarbrand at 305 makes me happy.
They stick around for a while and they put down immediate pressure. I think Blood Crushers, Bloodletter, and Skull Taker going down is very fortuitous. Now with the stacking buffs change or stacking damage change being official, because I think there's almost 2 ways. I think there's 3 ways you can go with demons. You can go with the Bellicor up down kind of play style that people have been playing now, with the last meta, the nerfed points, where they're just trying to outjank you and they have less stuff on the field, but they're just constantly doing up down, and it's hard to bring all your damage to bear on like the pinks or the greater demons. I think you can just go pure stat check, a la War Dog spam, where you're just running like Beast and Nurgle, Great and Clean Ones, Keeper of Secrets, and you're just like leaning on your opponent, and they're trying to clear all this high toughness, high wound count stuff with Field of Pains off the no man's land, and they don't really have the time or the board presence to clear out the stuff in your backfield, like your lone ops and like pinks and stuff like that. I also think you can just go where you are a like World Eater style stat check cracker, where you're just taking 2 to 3 Blood Thrones or Ren Masters, I'm sorry, and you're just, if your opponent has a stat check type army like Canoptic Court is a great example, or War Dog spam, and it's just kind of like, okay, I don't care, I have tons and tons and tons of damage. You have damage, I basically ignore that because my damage 1 goes to damage 1, my damage 2 goes to damage 1, and then I add +3 damage. And then like, oh, I have Skull Taker, I have Dev Wounds and like reroll hits and wounds, I think there's a lot of ways you can go with demons. I think demon players are going to be very happy.
Yeah, they're probably one of the armies I think made it the most, despite having no balance data slate changes. The point changes here give you so much options. Also, just stuff like Wraithguard being significantly less likely to be showing up keeps big boys alive so much longer.
I think Necrons are still like the clear winner of this data slate by virtue of taking no changes and everything else getting worse. But I think demons are right up there, not to bury the lead, but demons are right up there in the conversation with Dark Eldar for who wins the most.
For sure. Chaos Knights, more or less a slightly smaller version of the regular Knight changes, in the sense that they took a 10-point increase on Brigands down up to 170, and then everything else except all of the other War Dogs came when I guess the Morax came down 10, right? And then other than that, on the Executioner, everything else kind of stayed the same in sort of like the 12 to 13 list. And there was some changes to the Demon allies, but big boys, I still like one big boy in Chaos because you have the Panoply, which gives you the armor attempt for a big knight, which helps keep you alive, like an Abominant at 400. That is not terrible.
Lucas and I have been messing around with and John now too have been messing around with Lord of Dread, because if you fail that battle shock when you go in, that combat just flips on its head immediately. Because you might just use Terror Shades to swap the wounds around a little bit. You now have access to a 5-up Feel No Pain. They're +1 to wound you. You're -1 to hit them. So we've actually been having a lot of fun with that one. I also think I didn't like Morax's at 170. It just wasn't, their guns just weren't exciting enough, and their data sheet rule, which is Free Hero Convention, wasn't exciting enough, and they didn't have that Carapace gun for the indirect or the Stubbers or the Melty gun. But now I've kind of talked about this other places. At 160, I might experiment with taking one and try some of the different weapons, like the double conversion beamers, or I might even mess around with double claws. You don't get the benefit from having a second melee weapon, but now you have 2 anti-infantry 2-up ignore cover flamers, which is also kind of is a very nice synergy with Death Guard, but it's kind of nice that you just take one in CK, because now you have Stalker style melee, you have a viable Overwatch target, and you can Hurricane Ravine for free. That's not bad for like watching a point.
It's also nice into things like Wraiths, again, with their character keyword, with their character
exactly, and you still have access to a viable tank shock. But overall, I think Chaos Knights are going to be. I think if you're a Chaos Knight main, or you just really love playing Chaos Knights, and you're just going to be, you're going to stick with them no matter what. I think this is a really enjoyable way to try to get some models on the table. And now, instead of just pure War Dogs, you take one big knight and a bunch of War Dogs. However, I think it's a net loss, because you probably lost 5 to 15 points in your list because of Nurglings, depending on how many you're taking. The aggregate change for the big knights was about a 5 to 7% loss, and unless you pivot really hard into huntsmen and carnivores, that point gain is going to be less than the point nerf on your brigands. So there's definitely going to be some reshuffling, but I think you broadly just do the same thing you did before, just slightly worse. But maybe having the one big knight can really open up some options. I'm really looking at another Lancer for double tank shock.
Entirely reasonable. All right, that rolls us into Chaos Space Marine. So I think we're, along with Eldar, one of the obviously bigger losers. More coming on this in the balance data slate, but to start, a Curse Cultist up 10, Chaos Lord on foot up 20, Chosen up 20, so that's 40 points on the Chaos combo. We have Dark Commune up 10, so that's 30 points on a Curse squad, a double Curse squad, 20 points on the Forge Fiend, 30 points off the Corn Lord of Skulls, don't worry about it, 10 points on the Blood Ears, 10 points on Warp Talons, and then Rubrics and Blue Runes unchanged. They're just
I didn't fill out,
yeah.
but they
But broad strokes here, you can take that as, if you're playing like double Forge Fiend, triple Accursed, triple Chosen, your list went up what? That's 40 points on each of the Chosen squads. So that's 120, 90 points for the 3 Accursed squads, 40 points for the Forge Fiend. That's 250 point increase plus 4 pounds if you had them, potentially more. So yeah, you're talking like 200 to 300 point increases on like the most egregious of the Chaos Space Marine lists, and then any Chaos Space Marine list is probably taking somewhere in the region of 100 to 150. There are also balance data slate changes. I think Chaos Space Marines got hit really hard, and probably, depending on exactly how the Eldar changes in the data slate play out, arguably maybe harder than them, which was maybe warranted. There is still a ton of power in Chaos Space Marines, and there are lots of builds that work in here. I don't think Chosen are dead. I don't think Curse Cultists are particularly amazing, but you might still run one. Overall, like, you're going to tweak the way you play. If you want to keep playing Chaos Space Marines, you're going to be fine, but you're going to change it. I think Abaddon's probably on his way back in for reasons we'll get to, things like that. But you might see things like the Vindicator stepping up. It just is the same as we were saying for Ironstorm. The Vindicator is now cheaper than a Forge Fiend, which, while it's significantly less consistent, it is a lot more resilient in some ways. So you might find that that's a direction that you can take. Abaddon is still really good, so there's lots of mileage in Chaos Space Marine still, but they're not going to be what they have been for the past while, where if you didn't have an answer for 30 for 3 squads of a Curse Cultist, you just weren't going to win that game. And it's very good that that's not a thing that everybody has to think about ever again. Tim, do you want to run us through Death Guard? We're just going through the clutch of all of Tim's armies right now.
Yeah. It's kind of, they have sorry, I have like so many tabs.
I'll give you the point changes and you can talk
Nope,
about
I'm right
them.
here. I'm already right here. So Death Shroud Terminators, they went down to 120 for 3. They went down to 240 for 6. Lord of Virulence is down to 80. I think he was 100 before, or maybe like 110.
He was 100. Do you not have the spreadsheet open, Tim? Do you want the spreadsheet?
No, I'm already committed at this point. Typhus was down from 100 to 80. The Photo Bloat Drone is down from 100 to 90. Plague Burst Caller went up a little bit. Plague Marines went up 2 points per model. Overall, I think this is I would say a wash, but the ignore modifiers thing is definitely a nice change, because now Mortarion looks real good at 325 because he just gets to swing a full damage. I'm going to be testing him. I think he might not make the cut on WTC tables, because you have to account for the movement whenever you pivot with those giant wings around the ruins, but maybe as a rapid ingress tool to refuse the flank for any sort of Satan push. Typhus and Lord of Virulence were probably the best Terminator characters, and Death Shrouds were already kind of showing up in a lot of lists. They only really dropped out of favor when people just kind of started mass adopting the aggressive Liam VSL list with the Brigands. But now that list went up a bunch of points, with Brigands going up 10, I think now you might possibly be running more pure Death Guard, especially on teams where you might want to run solo CK. You might want to run. You definitely probably want to run solo demons. So I think now we can kind of go in a world where we take 2 units of discounted Death Shroud Terminators, and then we take Lord of Virulence, Typhus, and then maybe a Lord of Contagion, and then depending what your matchup is,
Really
2
of those characters go in. What was that?
I really still don't like the Lord of Virulence. I found him so underwhelming every time I played with him.
I really like him for the reroll wounds and the anti-infantry 4-up flamers. That comes up more often, you would think. And then he just kind of has like nice to have buffs. But I generally kind of like the idea of you run Lord of Contagion, Lord of Virulence, and Typhus, and then you run 2 units of Death Shroud Terminators, and then who attaches to what depends on what matchup you're playing at the table.
Yeah, I always like that kind of flexibility with leaders. For me, I definitely think I would be looking at like Typhus solo and then 3 Death Shroud with 3 Lord of Contagion still, because the hit rerolls are so much better for me.
Yeah,
but the Lord of
rerolls,
Virulence
the reroll, like again, but like, do you want rerolls on anti-infantry 4-up flamers? Do you want +1 to hit, ignores cover? Do you want a guy who throws out mortal bombs? Do you want the reroll hits in close combat? I just like having that flexibility.
It's
but
nice
we gotta
that
see how the list.
Yeah.
We gotta
It
see how
definitely-
it out.
It definitely hurts the Liam VSL build like going up so much, like as much as CSM did in some cases. And we have a game, and there's some small balance data slate changes there. This army is definitely going to see itself weakened if you try to play exactly the same way. Maybe, and I think maybe the top end, I don't know if the build that comes out of this is as strong as that build was, but that's probably a good thing, because that build was competing with the best, and it probably deserved a small tweak here and there.
The list that I won the GT with back in November, I think it was, where it was just triple PPC, 30 Plague Marines, 3 Rhinos, 2 units of Death Shrouds, and some Nurglings. I probably go back to something like that, where I probably just drop a PBC for like a Predator Destructor, just to give you some like sort of like long range shooting that's kind of a push data sheet that's been slept on for a little bit. And then you just go back to, you just try to take over 2 to 3 objectives, and then you use your Terminators and you just use your debuffs to kind of refuse the flank, and you just slowly push your opponent out of primary while kind of scoring your secondaries regardless of what they're doing.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Right. And I choose to believe that Typhus is buff because one of our hosts is called Typhus.
I've played against the solo Typhus a few times, and it's spicy.
Yeah, I love
good.
Typhus. He's my
He's
favorite
good.
Data and my Death Guard.
He's also my best. He's also probably the best painted model because when I bought that, someone rage sold their Death Guard back in the summer, and so I picked up like a 3,000 point, 4,000 point Death Guard collection for like $600, and
Man,
then
that guy's so stupid.
it just randomly had a pro painted Typhus in it, so that was cool.
All right, Drakari. We're going to run through the point changes here. We are very much burying the lead on Drakari. We will come back to this. Drazar down 15, Grotesques down 15 per 3, Hellions down 15 per 5, Incubi down 5 per 5, Raider down 10, Reavers down 10, Succubus down 10, putting her at 45 points, which is not a lot. Talos down 10 to 80, Venom down 10 to 70, and the Void Raven Bomber up 20 to 215. Definitely hurts the Void Raven Bomber. Everything else, wonderful. We are coming back to Drakari. They have made.
I absolutely love the Void Raven Bomber increase. That's just like looking at Scary running 3 of them, saying, "Stop that."
I think Dark Order will be fine.
Yes, we will be back to this. Genestealer Cults down 10 on Pure String Genestealers only. That's the only direct change to Genestealer Cults. I want to very briefly spiel for the Genestealer Cult players in the room. Chill. This is all good. We are very happy with these changes because Genestealer Cults just went through a balanced data slate without getting nerfed. And even when Genestealer Cults suck, we still get nerfed somehow. And almost everything that happened in the rules commentary was like direct one-to-one buffs. Disembarking from transports not counting as a normal move. Blips not dying to deep strikes. All this stuff, just money in the bank. Be very happy with your Genestealer Cults right now. Chill out. It's okay. They didn't need that many buffs. All the Predators got nerfed too. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Please stop whinging. Except you, Grey Knight players. You guys can whinge as much as you like because all that happened was the Brotherhood Librarian went up 10. Get screwed. There are
Someone ate a triple Vortex of Doom and said, "No, not again."
A couple of small balance data slate changes for Grey Knights. I think Grey Knights are probably, along with Thousand Sons, one of the armies that can claim the most to be hard done by the data slate, besides Adeptus Mechanicus. Like in terms of armies that probably deserved something.
They got some changes in the errata and in the commentary that benefit them,
but nothing
and they also got index card erratas that buffed them reasonably significantly.
For Grey Knights, I didn't think it was that big a deal. Like there were a couple of.
We'll talk about it and we'll get to it, but I think they're less hard done by than Thousand Sons. That's for sure.
Yes, that's definitely true. But it does kind of feel like every army that has a 3-inch deep strike just kind of got a little bit like, hold on,
stop that.
Let's not go too hard, in case we break this army. Okay. Next up, we have a Votann. Jeremy, do you want to take us through Votann?
Yep.
Who aren't at the beginning, by the way. What's up with that?
Sorry, what?
You said you put all your armies at the beginning.
They weren't an army when I was doing this, because Jeremy they didn't exist at the beginning of 10th. Let's be honest. So leagues, point hikes, but not massive ones. Thunderkin went up 10 for 3. Hearthguard went up 10 for 5, so 2 points a model. And Sagittar, the biggest increase, they went up 15 points a model. It's fine. I think in my review, I marked them as basically being neutral, maybe a slight loser overall. But like a typical sweet lose list from, I think he finished 5th at LVO, went up 135 points. My list that I just took to the team event this past weekend went up, I think it was 130 points. You know, it's an increase, but it's a manageable increase especially when you look at how hard CSM, for example, got.
You're gonna cut 1.5 things, but the 0.5 is so you can fit Grin Demeanor in.
Yeah, basically I drop a Praising Glare and 3 bikes, and my list is still 6 Sagittar, 20 Hearthguard, 30 Warriors, 2 calls, and 2 units of bikes still. It's fine.
It becomes a little more manageable. I think Votann are one of those ones that it's worth watching them. They may end up being problematic. I think they've definitely dropped off a little bit from where they were.
I think people learned how to play
more used to them. Yeah. All right, Krons
missing in action as well.
The only thing that Krons have lost is the update to the not being able to move wraiths when people are near you and the half damage thing on Catan. That's basically all that's changed for them. It's a shame. I think we would have liked to see a little more for Krons, but we can whinge about that on the main show.
I'm just thankful that we have the ignore modifiers change. I think that's going to be the shoestring that the rest of the meta kind of hangs on here with.
My Grim Demeanor, Thunderkin, or Hearthguard are going to be very happy into stands.
I mean that with Necrons being top and then the half damage thing, like that's actually kind of the only reason why I'm seriously considering Mortarion, because the movement and the pivots on WTC terrain is a very real albatross, but when they push into you with like a Nightbringer or something like that, just being able to immediately answer with Mortarion, feels good.
Yeah, because it doubles the output on most of your things that you're in melee with, because most of your stuff's
A lot of your
damaged too.
stuff's damaged too, yeah. And so with lethal hits and then having the auto 2 and then Mortarion himself, I mean, only 5 attacks, but if they don't have the CPU interrupt and you push, and all that shooting as well. So something to consider.
Yep. Wah?
No, we can skip orcs. I want to very briefly touch back on one thing. Plan generation, the making the icon bring models back is in the reinforcement step, so you could do it before you set the unit up. Because they're both simultaneous, so you would choose the order as it's your turn. So I knew I was right on that one. Go back like a full hour.
Yeah, you're good. Because it's not the end of the reinforcement step.
It's not the end of the reinforcement step. You can bring the models back, then set the unit up. So you can't get a shorter charge, but you can get your models back even though you went into reserve.
You just can't bring stuff back that got overwatched.
Yes. Okay, orcs. Orcs, very broadly, a lot of stuff that nobody was taking went down in points, and a lot of stuff that everyone was taking a lot of went up a little bit. It probably nets out to like the current builds go up somewhere between like 40 and 80 points, and then if you run some of the new stuff, you'll find your points back there.
Nathan said his list went down like 100 or 200 points, something like that.
Nathan was running stuff that other people weren't taking largely.
But that thing is like those. But
they're good.
That stuff was good, and like the 20 boys out of a battle wagon with lethal hits and sustained hits on 5s and follow me lads, and then you can do it again with the Wog Banner, and then you get more Makari's aura buff again.
But let's do the actual points first.
Sure.
So battle wagon down 25, Boomdaka Snazwagon down 10, Snoggle Brain Snodgelud down 15. Hunter Rig down 10, Kill Rig down 30, Killicans down 25 per 3. Custom Boom Blaster down 10, Megatrack Scrap Jet down 10, Morkonaut down 35, Pain Boys down 10, Rocket Truck Squig Buggy down 10, Shock Trump Jags down 15, Weird Boy down 10, and then increases knobs. Just the regular guys went up 5 per 5, Squig Cowboy Boys went up 15 per 3, and the truck went up 5. And then like the Hornsmoggle, Master Nads, and all the other stuff variably changed. Yeah, I'm sorry. I hate orc names. They are the worst. Yeah, I think something like Brian's Nottingham list went up 45 points, something in that region. But there's a lot of argument for like changing it out to have a battle wagon now, which is now a very resilient model that does the thing of being tanky enough to survive until you wah, and then you will never have time to kill it after you wah kind of thing. There's lots of interesting things in here. I don't love all the buggies going down. Worrying. Let's not.
I don't know how much. I think that might be a little bit of a paper tiger, just because the rules so much push you into infantry and cavalry and mounted stuff. Like out of transports. I think you'll see. I think you'll see like a buggy list show up every once in a while and like 4-1, 5-1, or maybe like take over a small GT. But I think people will try it and they'll be like, it's cute, it's fun, it is a lot of stats, But I think. I don't know. I do like the Killicans going down though. That's a really fun unit to rapid ingress with. But I don't know. I just don't think the full buggy list is going to actually come to fruition.
I'm a big fan of like single squig, like a single rocket truck. Like I think that's a very reasonable day issue for 100 points. It's like a backfield holder that can let your girls push up a little more aggressively and get their OC in the game. It's also like got the squig mine and like reasonable indirect. Like it does a decent job, and it makes your backfield a little less vulnerable to all of the like hyper crypty bullshit going around at the moment, where you can actually like physically screen it out a little better with like the size of the model. So I think like you could maybe see an argument for like one of them kind of thing. But yeah, outside that,
something to keep in mind: the Orc Codex is just around the corner.
That too.
So these changes may not even, we may not see the full extent of their impact by the time that comes out.
We're going to have them for a few months. Like, the Orc Codex is like spring, right? So that could be as late as April for the next Dataslate.
It's the next one after Dark Angels, though, isn't it?
I think that's Tau, because we've seen Tau stuff previewed, right?
Anyways,
I would
keep
just,
talking.
I would strongly recommend to just basically take Maiden's list, because that list is, I've seen that list just completely clean house versus Necrons. It just looks really good in Necrons. It felt like the Necrons didn't even have a chance, and that the points went down. So I would just save yourself the brain power. Take that list, then take the points you gained from his LVO list, and then add in whatever unit satisfies your brain worms, and then just mess with that until the Codex comes.
Yeah, and I just checked. The order for spring is Dark Angels, Orcs, Custodes, Tau, CSM, because they have their roadmaps are posted in order now.
No, well, let's see if it stays that way. But in theory, we've seen the Tau box previewed, which definitely makes me think that it will be first. But there is, always scheduling things stuff with this stuff, right? So we'll see what actually happens. Right, Tau themselves. I was expecting more on Tau. I'm not going to lie. I am still heartbroken that Tetras are 40 points a model, and I will fight anybody who says that this army is fair and balanced. Crisis Suit Commanders went down 10. Enforcer Battlesuit Commanders went down 10, notably the Cold Star, which is the one that you see most often, did not change. The Crisis Suit squad itself went up 20 per 3, so 40 points on a full squad, putting them at still somehow very cheaply 400 points for 6. The Riptide Battlesuit went down 15 points because Triptide is eternal, and Vespid Stinglings came down 10. And you will still never see them because Piranhas and Tetras exist.
I could see an argument for Vespids at 65.
Yeah, I could see an argument, but I also think you should run more Piranhas and Tetras. So
yeah,
you will probably see Triptide start showing up again, because
165 for that
always
data sheet is
it's so many rolls.
Still fewer than 9.
So many rolls. Well, it doesn't Nova Charge anymore, right?
Yeah, this seems safe.
Well, for now. Maybe he'll Nova Charge it anyway.
Thousand Suns.
Yeah, the shielded missile drone is a pretty reasonable gun to add. It does good shooting. So, okay, T-Suns. Yep, we're done. Cool.
0 changes.
I
think they forgot.
I don't know if T-Suns offended.
I think
even GSC had the here's Gene Stealers down 10, and they're in a fine spot. T-Suns might be in a fine spot, but you look at it and it's like, when was the last time you saw a unit as Angors?
Yeah, I could have definitely seen rubrics coming down a point per model, and then Zangers coming down 2 points per model. But
honestly, I think the rubrics are fine. I would have buffed given Scarab Occult's playability and things like that, right? That's the
sure. I mean,
but I think you bring Scarabs down to 200 for 5.
Sure, but I think even just the 25 rubric list, just gaining an extra unit, does wonders for that list. I think World Eaters. I think the biggest thing is the changes that we don't see, the World Eaters getting pushed out of the meta is huge. I think Dark Elder coming back in the meta might make that a little bit of a wash, though. It depends on how much popularity and player population
and how good that list actually ends up being once we get around to it.
For sure. I mean, the biggest thing is CSM and World Eaters got nerfed, and those were very bad matchups. I felt for Thousand Suns because they just kind of rushed you down. They didn't play the game that Thousand Suns want to play.
Moving towards more MSU is also pretty good for the Eldar matchup.
Custodians got buffed.
Custodians to get buffed. That sucks. Jury's out. I definitely think that they dropped the ball here, but I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think the meta is going to shift in a way that gives a foothold for Thousand Suns to kind of inch their way back into the meta and start putting up some results. It's just I wish they had gotten directed changes also.
Yeah, very fair. Okay, Tyranids. There's a lot and a little here. It's an interesting set of changes. The Broodlord came down 10. The Gene Stealers came down 10. The Norn Assimilator came down 20. The Norn Emissary came down 15. They're still the wrong way around points-wise. I do not understand why the Assimilator is more expensive than the Emissary, and I never will. The Screamer Killers came down 25. I think that is still a little much. The Toxic Crane came down 30. You still can't move it. The Trigon came down 10. The Tyrannifex came down 55, which is one of the biggest drops of anything that's not like a Castus Knight.
As a
And I
percentage, it's the biggest drop.
still don't think it's that good, but it's definitely a lot more interesting now. And then on the other side of things, sort of like your scoring package went up a little bit. So Death Leaper went up 10, which relative to his index data sheet, he went up 5 points to gain a 3rd armor save. I think most people would take that trade, although he is huge now. Gargoyles went up 5, putting them at 80, which chill. Neurolictor went up 15, which again is probably fine, and the Power went up 5, which was again a recompense for it gaining a point of toughness, a point of save, and a wound or something like that in the Codex. It was like ridiculous, like I say, to 30.
It also gained a huge detachment in Harvester, where its wounds just became so much more efficient.
Yeah, and it's also just like a very big base model for screening. It's for some reason still infantry. Like I think the 35 for a Power is completely reasonable. You're still paying like 7 points a wound. Overall, I think Nids make out pretty well from like this and also some general balanced data slate changes. There's like obviously if you were running like 30 gargoyles and Death Leaper and 2 or 3 neurolictors and 2 or 3 Pyrovores, like you're just going to lose a bunch of points, and you're not going to get that back without changing to some of the data sheets that went down. So like the very sort of standard like invasion fleet / snap lists like Lenin list or like the list that Caillou played at WCW are definitely changing around. But if you see something like the Vanguard Nids list that just went 6 into Uprising, that list has, you know, it doesn't lose a ton, but it gains some updates from like the general rules changes. Like Nids will probably come out in the wash, and if you want to run a lot of the stuff that changed, then you know you could probably make an argument for like double Tyrannifex now. That is a very resilient data sheet for its points now. Where at 245 it was not that great because it had a big flamer, but now at 190, like that's a lot more. You can get away with a lot more when you're under 200 points in Nids because there's so much competition. The other stealth buff here, Exocrines did not change, and how is that data sheet 135 points? That data sheet could very easily have gone up 30 points and still been incredibly playable. So consider that a stealth buff. I don't understand that one either. The like invasion fleet lists, or Snaptic swarm list, like the Tyranids list that Sam Pope was playing at LVO, almost unchanged. Like you'll cut a Neurolictor for a regular lictor or something else now, and like cool, whatever. Very, very interesting. Next up, we have World Eaters. Now, I'm going to preface this. We're going to talk, presumably, a great deal at length about World Eaters on tonight's show because a certain member of the StatCheck crew is known for them. I would not describe his thoughts as being overly positive on the subject, but so if you want to hear the vitriol take on this,
let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to hear Anthony's thoughts on World Eaters, come back to check out the show tonight at 11 p.m. UK time, 6 p.m. EST. But 8-bound up 10 per 3. Exalted 8-bound up 10 per 3. Lord of Skulls down 30. Good go on Team Iceland. Karn the Betrayer up 20. The World Eaters Forge Fiend down 25 because it was 145 points for some reason, or 170 points for some reason, and the Executions up 20. These are pretty painful points changes to a list that was already kind of cutting it fine, like playing 25 points under. So like you can absorb a little bit of this, but like most lists are going up 80, 90 points, which is a very difficult number in an army that has very expensive units.
Yeah,
like
the 1975 goes up 80, so it's now 2055.
Yeah, which means cutting a full thing, right? Like you're not playing like 55 point units in this army, you're playing 145 point units. There's also balanced data set changes. I think World Eaters are along with Eldar and Chaos Space Marine, one of the hardest nerf armies, which was probably unnecessary in some senses, but also understandable in others. It's a play pattern that, I don't know, it's one of those play patterns that I always feel like should just never really be that good. But why did Angron not go up? That's the thing that confuses me. Like, a bunch of this stuff was fine and Angron wasn't.
I think Angron doesn't need to go up in light of the other changes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's... The list in general went up because after you take Angron, you have no choice but to take units that have now gained points. So it's functionally the same thing as Angron going up. Like don't lose the woods for the trees. Like what do you?
There's a degree of argument that when we get to it, the reason that like Favorite of Corn changed was because of how reliable bringing Angron was. Now, all that's happened by making it less reliable is it's now even more of a coin flip when he comes back, and the list is even more inconsistent, and the highs are even higher, and the lows are even lower, and all it does is it makes the army even more volatile.
You have a faction built around a lottery system, and then you hit the main way to add some reliability into that. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Whereas I think you should just make it less tempting to take the lottery, right? Like just make you want to play the more consistent version of the list.
but I mean, like that's why. But there's not that option there. Like, World Eaters are the lottery faction. Like, straight up, that's their rule. Like, they have melee, and then they have a lottery system to make that melee work.
Yeah, I
Like,
think you could have. I think you could have just gone for let's make it less appealing to just have to play the lottery, and you can play a more consistent build.
But I'm saying you keep acting like you can opt out of it. You can't.
Well,
You're
you
playing
can because you could opt out of playing Angron and play other data sheets that are less reliant on the lottery, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, make Angron more expensive rather than making the 8-bound more expensive to make playing just 8-bound more appealing than playing Angron, so that you don't have to opt into the full commitment to the lottery.
So now you're still rolling charges and hoping you make them. You're still trying to get that advance in charge.
Yes, but none of that is even remotely the same order of magnitude as bringing
Please stop
Angron.
interrupting me. Please stop interrupting me. You're trying to put damage 2 into a half damage meta. Like, come on, man. Like, this is a little disingenuous. Like, it's we all, I think we all agree that it was pretty heavy handed.
I agree with that. I'm not disagreeing with like it being a heavy-handed nerf. I just think it didn't hit the things it needed to hit. Like, if you're going to nerf Angron,
I will agree
nerf
with that.
Angron.
I will agree with that. Like, I think the yeah, it kind of felt the same way as how they hit John's WCW list, where it was kind of like, oh, what is X player playing? Just plus 5-10 points across the board across that entire faction.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, they were clearly good, but they were winning significantly less than a lot of other armies that didn't get hit with nearly the same or got buffs.
This is where I think GW is kind of, not just looking at like the top, not looking at the 98th, 99th percentile player as like how they balance their game. Like, I think there's just,
I don't think they ever will, because we're not the target.
There was a lot of players at the mid table or playing casual games who were just getting railroaded by this list, and to them, like, if you're playing at the 50 to 80 percentile, a lot of times there's just no counterplay to an opponent just rushing you with their army and then just killing everything. There just isn't, Whereas, like, if you start getting into like the 95th and up percentile, to us it doesn't make sense. We're like, well, it's not winning events, it's not converting events. But I think this is kind of a peek behind the curtain at how GW actually, balances their game.
Yeah. Well, and also if you watch the MetaWatch video with Josh Roberts, he does talk a little bit more about that philosophy and, dealing with, player experience just as much as dealing with, what's dominating at events.
No.
So I don't necessarily agree with their approach in World Leaders either, but I think that that's a larger discussion for tonight and for later.
For sure. I think at the end of the day, the biggest issue is they didn't really give any wiggle room like to pivot, for
they're
the faction,
a pretty one-dimensional faction.
Yeah, like if they had given them some, if they had like, cut, I know they don't want to cut points on data sheets because then you just accidentally create a thick city kind of situation again. I think they really don't want that again. But if you had, some units were up 5 points, but other units were only up 10.
If Berserkers were 90 points, would you take more of them?
Exactly. Like
but would you?
I probably would. Because like, what other choice do you have?
Yeah. And I think that's exactly the argument that I was trying to make with like put Angron's points up rather than the stuff that supports Angron to make it more appealing to run. Like 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound aren't that good a data sheet in the sense of like they need to be 160 points for 3 of them. If you made them a little less expensive, so you could justify running, 3 squads of 6 of them in a, like, which I get is a, it's not a data not an army with a lot of data sheets. You kind of end up with you're going to run 3x6 of something. If you make it so that it's the infantry units that are less dependent on the coin flip mechanics, less dependent on going first and all that kind of thing, rather than the big Primarch model that has the inherent, complete randomness. There's a direction to go instead there, where now you have to play the same thing but worse.
That was the thing, is like now the big thing is now that like World Eaters players are rudderless, whereas like where Death Guard, there were some nerfs, but then also there was some clear directions where they're clearly trying to nudge you in a direction. Like a lot of factions, it just felt like, okay, we want to see a little bit less of this data sheet on the table and on stats, but we want to see more of this data sheet. We want to encourage you to explore stuff. We want to encourage you to take more big stuff. Whereas World Eaters, it's just like, it just felt like we want to see less of this in general, and we don't really have an answer for you when you ask where do I go from here.
Yeah, you're kind of priced into playing the same thing but less consistent now, which is even more of a feels bad when it goes off for both players. Like neither player is going to be like one player is going to be unhappy whatever happens in a World Eaters game now, because either you will roll consistently and you'll do all your stuff, or you will roll badly and you will not, and there's very little you can do about it player agency wise, which is exactly the wrong kind of nerf for this army.
Yeah,
I guess you could play triple fortune, triple corn lord of skulls.
Ugh. I would I think
double Lord of Skulls and Angron. Let's go.
I mean, unfortunately, what's done is done. But I would have for sure loved to see some of lighter touch on some of the stuff. Maybe minus 1 point per model on Zerkers. They could have even thrown us a curveball and dropped Mauler Fiends by like 20 points or something. Like make it some people experiment with that. But
all right, I think that then leads us on to the actual balance data slate itself.
Agents of the Imperium didn't change for anyone.
Yeah. Right. I am going to throw up a screen preview of the balance data slate because I think we'll run through pretty much everything in this one. So I think it makes sense to have the actual thing on screen for that. Let me just check what tab this is. There we go. So we now have the balance data slate. So what has changed in the balance data slate? This is all stuff that was the same. So first one, we have Triumphs in the Catherine for Adeptus Sororitas. It's now 2 acts of faith per phase instead of 1, which is the ability. Previously, it was unlimited, so you could funnel like 57 miracle dice through an Exorcist on Overwatch, or through the Dialogus combo on Sisters of Battle Squad, and funnel a billion metal wounds onto somebody. Now you get 2, which is still more than 1. It's still pretty reasonable, but there are now a lot more reasons to look at other options on the acts of faith.
It's definitely a lot more reasonable to look at a Sisters player who has Morven Vol sitting in range of it, and 12 4+ miracle dice behind them, and go, do you want to try to kill Morven? Because I just have these. Yeah,
there's now a lot more cost. I think the Triumph is still great, a fantastic
little day. Amazing for its points still.
But less you're not going to feel like you're punching a brick wall when you're playing in Sisters with that now, which is all upside. For Custodes, the only real change here is if you inflict a critical wound with the Devastating Wounds ability, you now gain you get the 4-up Film of Pain ability against it. So you get your 4-up Film of Pain against Devastating Wounds just in time for Wraithguard to disappear.
They got it back.
I mean, a lot of people said that this was like the one thing kind of holding Custodes back. So let's see people put their money where their mouth is. Between the Trajan buff with the ignore mods, and with the points changes, I think Custodes were kind of being a little bit slept on anyways. But I think those 3 changes really give them some real big leg ups.
Agree.
Yep. All the rest of this is stuff that was in the previous slate. Right. Eldar. This is obviously the big one that I think everybody was waiting for. There are a bunch, so let's run through all of them and then talk about the higher order information. So Strands of Fate is now 66 rather than 12d6. Fate's Messenger only affects the bearer, not the bearer and his unit. Phantasm is now a normal move of up to d6 inches, and you still can't embark on a transport. Eldrad still gives you 3 dice, but there's a clarification that it's up to an addition of 9. The Night Spinner is now -2 to move, advance, and charge instead of -2 to move and cannot advance. The Incarn is now once in your turn only. You can teleport, and so you can't do it. It's no longer once per phase, and you can no longer do it in your opponent's turn. And Wraithguard can only shoot at the unit that shot them when they fire back using the War Construct ability. These are huge changes.
These are amazing changes.
There is also, very notably, one thing that is missing here, which is the Fate dice are no longer restricted to 1 per phase.
That's not true.
Is that not?
Because that's in the index card.
Is that in the index card?
It's not a balance change. That was a army change. So it applies to everything.
Get screwed, Eldar. Good. I was worried about that. That's a good change.
I'm pretty sure. I have the index errata open, so I will just double check to make sure that's still in there.
So main things in here. Eldar are now less consistent at generating a ton of miracle dice. The miracle dice they do generate are still just as strong as they ever were. Fate's Messenger no longer allows Wraithguard squads to be incredibly good at dealing a ton of damage. You're not going to see a Spirit Seer attached to a Wraithlord nearly so much anymore. Not that was something you saw much anyway. But Tim, I remember you had a great time with that.
I genuinely like that guy. I was like that's pretty clever. It's just watching this Wraithlord phantasm around. I mean, I don't know. I still kind of like it.
I'm glad it's gone. The Night Spinner is now no longer just shutting off advances wholesale. I think I would argue this ability is kind of a side grade. Like it's better into some targets, worse into others.
It's better into most targets statistically. It's worsened to any army that has an auto advance 6, and it's worse to any army, I think it's just Necrons, that can teleport or do other things when they advance.
It's worse against any army that doesn't want to charge as well.
Any
yes.
army or data sheet that had some sort of rule that takes effect when you advance, like for example the Transcendent Catan who teleports when he advances. You would just hit him with a spinner over and over again. Now he's just stuck on his side of the board, moving 6 inches a turn, or
Tau
4 inches
Crisis
a turn
Suits,
actually.
another Tau Crisis Suits being another example of a unit that really benefits from being -2 to its advance because it all advances 6. Yeah, if you're specifically like a charge faction that doesn't like advance and charge, you just like move charge. This will take a little bit off your speed. For anything else, this is basically net upside.
Yep.
The Incarn no longer teleporting defensively.
I think that's the biggest change overall, and hear me out. Just because like for your average Warhammer player, like they don't have to, like that's really the thing that probably more than anything else, that and Phantasm, where it's just kind of like if you're like that 50th to 80th percentile player, and you're just trying to just play a game,
Yep.
maybe not necessarily in a tournament, that's the one that would basically just kind of brick your entire turn.
Well, even
And-
like
and
the
your
high
entire
90
game.
percentiles, this is something that comes up. It came up in a scrim game last night with Team Canada. I was playing Eldari into Tau, and he shot and killed Fuegan while the Incarn was lined up perfectly to get rinsed by Crisis Suits. And I
Yep.
went, I'm not going to do this to you because you know better, but I could have just...
Yep.
And
But now
that
you don't
just
need. Now you
doesn't
don't even.
exist anymore. You don't
now
have
you
to
don't-
worry about making sure you activate in the right order. And
But now you
most
don't have to. You don't have to clear that no better bar. Like yes, like there's a no better, but like that's also like at the end of the day, it's kind of like an elitist way to approach the game. It's like okay, well,
to a degree,
there's players who know better, and then there's everyone else. Or like worst case scenario, even if you do know better, you can engineer situations where it's like you just don't get to do damage into the Eldar army at all until the Incarn is off the board that turn.
Yep.
This would be a go turn, but he's trading away the Incarn. He's like I already got some value out of the Incarn. Now I'm pushing it forward, and now it's kind of like, do you want to have a go turn or do you want to take the Incarn off the table? You don't get to have both.
Yeah, you can now like charge the Incarn and shoot other stuff. You don't have to worry about getting overwatched to death and the Incarn teleporting to the thing that got overwatched. There are so many second order like changes to this. Yeah, like a lot of the big ones, like if your opponent throws a squad of War Spiders at you, you don't have to get a squad of something out to deal with the Incarn if he teleports to where the War Spiders were, because you just can't teleport the Incarn there now.
You know what
The
this also
Incarn
fixes?
Pokeball is still great, but
This fixes two Eldari players playing each other and arguing about who has to choose to use the Incarn first. And then the Wraithguard change is just a nice quality of life change that should have been made months ago, because everything else that fires back at the thing that shot at it, not just, oh, your Crisis Suit shot me and then fire and faded away, but there's another Crisis Suit unit right here. I'm going to kill them.
Yep. And the Phantasm change, everybody who ever uses against me will still move 6. I know this for a fact. But any infantry model on like a 25mm base can't go through a wall with any thickness now. Something like a Wraith Guard, like you have to, like, there is a risk inherent in that now. You cannot just guaranteed have a unit that is always going to be safe. Very, very good change.
I just noticed something. Could I actually miss this the first few times I read through this? If it's been changed in the slate, it's because there's a little plus sign next to it. So there's a little icon next to the entry.
Yep. Okay. Asher Militarum Voice of Command. This bit here. So you can now, if you set up on the battlefield from a transport or from reserve, you can now issue orders if you're an officer. So you can now put your Scion command squad in reserve, drop down, give orders to the guys that came down with you, rather than being restricted to just doing it on the board. Good quality of life change that helps card out a little bit. I don't think it's a massive deal in terms of anything that people are doing just now, but it might open up some new build options.
It opens up some play with Scions, outflanking tank commanders, all sorts of different things that you might want to play around with. It allows them to play a more dynamic game rather than constantly be like, these are where my orders are going to be next turn. I hope that nothing happens here.
Yeah, I think again, it's a good quality of life thing. Like I said, not a massive change, just because most of the damage wasn't really coming from infantry. That might change a little bit depending how dominant Dark Eldar become. But it's a nice quality of life change. It'd be nice if they got something a little bit extra, just in light of they got no cuts whatsoever to the points for the faction. But
I think they were in a fine spot before, so
yeah, you could also do some things like if you have like an army that's very much in transports, but you don't want to have the characters in transports, like bring the character on from Cruiser with the stuff that disembarked, and then hand out orders at the end of the phase as well. So there's like some nice little sequencing options here where you could use like a silent
it
command
also
sword.
allows you to double up orders with characters in chimeras.
How so?
Because the Chimera has a datasheet ability that allows you to issue orders from it, from embarked officers, if I remember correctly.
Does that not have a timing restriction on it?
I don't know. Let's find out. Chimera. Abilities. In your command phase. So that means that you can issue an order from the Chimera, move the Chimera, disembark, or just disembark from the Chimera, and then issue your order again.
But you would have to be eligible to issue orders, right? And you're only eligible to issue a certain number per turn. And you would have already issued an order because it counts as the officer issuing an order when you do it in the Chimera.
Agreed.
Anyway, I'll let you come back to that. Blood Angels, the Red Thirst attachment rule now gives +2 to strength instead of +1. This exists. It's a change that happens.
Attacks too, or +1 attack.
Strength. Oh, they already had the +1 attack. Well, their detachment ability was
shows you how much I saw Blood Angels.
Yeah, exactly. It's Sons of Sanguinius. No one plays it. Well, you can see in the stats how many people actually play it. But yeah, it used to be 1 strength, 1 attack. Now it's 2 strength, 1 attack. It's a cool buff. I don't know if it's going to be substantial enough to make Sons of Sanguinius playable over, say, Gladius or Firestorm.
This exists.
Yeah. My turn. I will play it now.
It's free. So.
Okay. Demonic Pact. When you ally in demons to other Chaos armies, you now have to bring a battle line unit for every other unit of that keyword you would want to bring. So if you want to bring the Changeling or the Blue Scribes, you need a unit of Blue Horrors or Pink Horrors in order to accommodate that. If you want to, bring Scarbrand, you need a unit of Bloodletters, blah, 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 blah.
Celeste requires Demonettes, etc.
Yep. Big change. It definitely hurts any army that was trying to ally in like demon characters. Nurglings are notably still battle line, so any army that was doing that basically doesn't care. Yeah, it's a fine change.
Yep, that's fine. It feels very squarely aimed at the cutting edge CSM list we're seeing. I think honestly, like the 65, what were the 65 scribes just become a 70-point solo beast of Nurgle, and then you just take your Nurglings as required.
Yeah, you will see.
It feels like a 1-for-1.
You won't see like Flesh Hounds allied in or anything like that anymore because you're not bringing Bloodletters. But
no.
You now also can't ally Shalaxi, which is not a huge deal, but it's definitely something that I have seen in a few lists because you can't bring in 500 points. You can't bring a Demonette Squad and Shalaxi.
I didn't think about that.
Which is still a little sad because I think that was a cool build that was like okay to exist, but
yeah, it was fine. It was
necessary casualty.
How many points is 2 units of Nurglings and 2 Great Unclean Ones?
2
you can't many, I think.
So it's 530.
Okay, just barely.
Just barely.
Yeah, would have been funny.
Okay, Chaos Space Marines, another very, very significant set of changes here. Marked transports can only transport units of the same mark, which is, pretty big.
Nurgle Rhinos.
Is taking a mark mandatory?
Yes.
No, that's a shame.
The app even says, "Hey, by the way, you need a mark. You can't be markless."
So you now can't have like a chosen squad, which is undivided, and a Legionnaire squad, which is Slanesh, inside a Nurgle Rhino. They would now all have to be the same mark, all 3 units.
I think on this one, what could have been done, but I think it's just complicates things further, that it doesn't apply to undivided.
I think that does the exact job of not fixing the issue even a little bit, though.
But it does fix the issue because it means that it doesn't apply to undivided transports.
Yeah,
like an undivided transport, you can shove whatever you want in it, but it does fit. It gives them a bit more flexibility because, like, an undivided Rhino is at least interesting.
Yeah,
it is a very clear fix to the stop putting shit in this thing because it doesn't make sense.
Stop using Nurgle Rhinos, you monsters.
Well, you can use Nurgle Rhinos. You just have to use Nurgle. I'm not going to.
So you're never going to see a Nurgle Rhino ever again. The Nurgle strat now exists for Fortrines.
And even then,
Speaking
next entry,
the Dark Obscuration Stratagem is now 18 inches, which I think is a great change. I think it's exactly what it needs. It stops you getting shot to bits, but if your opponent wants to close with you, they can still deal with you.
Yeah. Now it's basically just what Be'lakor does.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think broadly you could probably change most loan up abilities to be 18, but
I think loan up in general
on
be
command abilities. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like the activated abilities, sure, but like regular loan up at 18 would be dangerous.
Nids can keep their 6 because it's funny and conditional.
No, it can be 9 now.
Yeah. Profane Zeal now has, first of all, lost the effect that works on all Chaos units. So currently, Profane Zeal is reroll 1s to hit and wound, and if you are undivided, you reroll all hits and all wounds. It is now changed to only affect Chaos Undivided units, and it provides only wound rerolls. So there's no ability to use it for reroll 1s to hit and wound, and then you lose the hit reroll on undivided units. In addition to the 40-point increase to Chaos Chosen and Curse and Chaos Lord, they now also lose their hit reroll, so they are a little bit less consistent.
They
You
still
still have
reroll
reroll
ones
to
when they
hit.
packed, so there's like it's just basically 2s and 3s if you have a minus that you don't, but it does prevent the fish for 6s.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think like it's good that they put on the wound roll instead of the hit roll, because that's where all the packs really got their power from, was the rerolls. I think limiting this Chaos Undivided only felt like a step too far. I don't know.
Yeah, it probably could have stayed as reroll 1s to wound for everything, but whatever, frankly. This definitely does the thing of driving you back towards maybe considering Abaddon again, because he has a full hit reroll aura, which is obviously very powerful with, wound rerolls combined. Okay, Accursed Cultists had 2 changes. They are now OC1. Nobody knows why they were OC2 to begin with.
Because they were battle line in the last edition? Or troops in the last edition?
Were they?
I don't know if they were.
Me neither. I don't really...
I think they were troops.
Let's find out.
At any rate.
Yeah, I'm like 90% positive.
They're not battle line this edition. There was no reason they should be OC2. Regular Cultists weren't OC2. Now they are not OC2. They also only get models back in the Chaos Space Marine player's command phase.
As it should be.
As it always should have been, as basically every other version of this rule was now. These guys in Wraithguard had the bad version, and now they have the good version.
This was the... do you have a slot in your bingo card for the rare quintuple nerf? Because that's what Accursed Cultist got.
The Accursed quintuple, 2 points increases, 2 rules changes, and Profane Zeal. Yeah.
Points OC, Accursed Horde ability, Profane Zeal, Dark Obscuration.
I mean, it's one of the two, right? Profane Zeal or Dark Obscuration. They were only nerfed on one of the two. But
if you were bringing 2 squads, 1 undivided, 1 Nurgle.
Sure. I mean, it's the same for Chosen, right? So.
Well, that doesn't change anything. That doesn't change my opinion in the slightest.
Yes, good.
Yeah.
Frankly, screw them. They deserved it. I think one squad is still perfectly fine. They still do a ton of stuff.
It's a big old brick of annoying
still a lot of
kill.
OC. I think one is fine, but you will not see tons.
And they were troops.
I'm just glad I don't have to buy this kit anymore, because I like my CSM faction to be Chaos Space Marines, not a bunch of hanger-ons. A few hangers-on is fine, but I just don't like that kit.
All right, Tim, do you want to talk us through the Biologist Putrefier's change?
Okay, so the big thing is that you can't do the quadruple grenade in a single turn anymore. You just can do grenade, and then you can do an extra grenade. This on paper sounds like a big nerf, but like a lot of times in the play patterns that I was seeing, once you disembark all 30 Plague Marines, the game ends in a turn, one way or another at that point. Usually what you're doing is you're just kind of feeding out Plague Marines, and like a unit will go over here, the next turn a unit will go over here, next turn a unit will go in the center, and you were only using I found myself only using double grenades a lot. So for my play patterns generally, this is fine. But also I think there's a real possibility where you might cut a unit of a Rhino and Plague Marine package just to get some of the other stuff and go in different directions of the list. And you might go down to 2 Biological Putrefires anyways. So I don't think it's that bad.
It removes a little bit of the oh shit, I need to solve a problem now. Where if you get hard pressured, you don't have the hey, take 12 mortals now.
That's the big thing, because I was experimenting with a version of Liam VSL's list where I was running 2 Brigands and 1 Carnivore, just because if someone hard pressured me, they would eat Typhus, 4 grenades, and then a tank shock that turn, and that solved a lot of problems. You can't really do that anymore.
Notably, the Gene Stealer Cult version of this didn't change. The Saboteur can still do whatever it wants. For some reason. Hers isn't even once per game. It's just every turn. Now, she will die if she goes near something, so they're a little different. Okay, Drakari. When they power from pain now, they get +1 AP on melee attacks. This is a nice quality of life change for an army that is very low strength. Getting just that little bit of extra conversion through will help a ton for them.
Roughly equivalent to like +1 to wound a lot of times, except that you're just almost always getting it.
Yeah. There are some armies it does nothing against. There are some units it will do nothing for. Some armies it'll be incredible for.
But broadly, it just makes them.
It's a nice little buff, right? It's not huge. It won't break anything. It just seems fine.
Hi, Scary.
Okay, Archons can now join Incubi, which gives them access to reroll to wound.
Should have been able to from the beginning.
Does that give Incubi access to Court of the Archon?
No.
Okay.
Court of the Archon attached to Kabalites, and then the Archon leads that combined unit.
Okay, that was
They
going
do
to
not
be...
attach to Archons.
All right, the show is about to take a hard left turn, depending on your answer there.
No changes for Gene Star cults. Grey Knights. So Grey Knights got a really weird change in that they just buffed the Grandmaster and Nemesis Dread Knight. He got +1 weapon skill on his melee on his Great Hammer and Nemesis Greatsword, so he hits on 3s and 2s respectively. It was weird that he hit on 4s and 3s beforehand, so good. And the heavy side cannon gained a point of AP and ignore cover, so functionally +2 AP in this edition. I think this makes one Grandmaster pretty reasonable, especially with Sigil of Exigence if you're not running quite as much of a Terminator build. The plus damage in melee one is fine as well. I don't think this makes the guy incredible. He seems fine.
So what you're saying is that Riley at LVO, who made top 16 with NDKs, was prescient.
Yeah, he was one of the pressure brethren, 100%. You're the worst, Jeremy. Okay, Laylo the Tyrants is now reroll a hit roll and a wound roll instead of a hit roll of 1 and a wound roll of 1.
That's pretty nice.
Nice, very simple quality of life change. Direct buff to Knights, because Laylo the Tyrant, it just helps your efficiency. It also makes it really funny if you're running who's Flamer, the big Flamer guy. I'm drawing a blank.
Valiant.
Acheron?
Yeah, the Valiant with the harpoon. You can now just fish for the mortals.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. That's really good. It's nice on Canis, where you turn a miss into a critical hit 5. I think people are going to mess around with the Thermal Crusaders, or bring Thermal Crusaders back, maybe experiment with that. It's just I don't know what more to say. It's a really good quality of life change.
Yep.
Combined with the points changes.
Notably, what's not here is one thing people were hoping for, which is Bondsman going back to working on Big Knights. Good, frankly.
It's fine.
Nothing for Votan, nothing for Space Marines.
I do love how that Desolation Squad change is still in the balanced Dataslate.
Yeah. Look, for the casuals, you can still run 10 Desolation Marines, but if you want to play a balanced game...
So what you're saying is if I'm playing Crusade...
Yes.
And I go to the Grand Narrative, I can take 10 Desolation Marines and
if you're playing Crusade with Nathan, you can do whatever you want. Okay, Space Wolves. Now, I'm pretty sure all that happened here is that these were battle round and now they're player turn.
That's exactly what changed. Basically, you now get 2 chances at a saga every single battle round.
Yeah, but you can still only pick each one once. So you've only got like 2.5.
It powers up your army faster, in theory.
Yeah.
But
if you can pull it off.
Yeah. Some of them are really hard to pull off, and some of the buffs just...
The main thing you can do here is if you go second, you can not pick one and then pick one based on the situation at the end of your opponent's turn. Rather than
no, because it was at the end of the battle round that you chose it, and it was just if you achieved it in the previous battle round.
Yeah, but you would have to so if you were going second, you would pick one at the end of the battle round. Your opponent would then play a turn, knowing what you had picked, and then you would play your turn.
No, because these things always look back. At the end of each player's turn, you select one of the sagas listed below. If that saga was completed by your army during that turn, all it does. So all it changes here is that before it was at the start of your turn or at the end of your turn, you would do this. So it just means that if you happen to have achieved a saga during your opponent's turn, you now can trigger the bonus.
Got you. So if you
it's a straight buff. It's a really nice change. I don't know if it makes them playable.
It's a quality of life change.
Yeah.
There are people who will run any army, regardless of how bad it is, just because either they can make it work in their local meta, or they just really like the army, and if they're winning half their games or more or whatever, they're just having fun, and those people deserve to also get changes as well.
Maybe with the Wolfen change that we'll very briefly touch on after we're done with this World Eaters bit, we will see some Space Wolves on the table again. Okay, World Eaters. Man, they really know how to kick a faction when it's down, don't they? The Berserker Glaive has lost its plus D3 attacks and damage on the charge and is now just plus 1 attack and damage. Favorite of Khorne, which is the reroll to the Blood Mulligan, basically, is now once per battle instead of once per battle round. And the World Eater's Demon Prince is now a 5+ invulnerable save unless they already have an invulnerable save, in which case it's a 4+. So screw Jackals, screw bringing Angron back, and screw the Master of Executions. And I'm not sure what's left in that faction once you increase the points on 8-bound.
I don't know. Favorite of Khorne went down 10 points.
Did it?
Yeah, it's 30 now. It used to be 40.
Something, I guess.
Cool.
I do think it's funny how a Demon Allies detachment in that army now does a better job at what the Master of Executions was trying to do.
No, but Skulltaker.
Yeah, with Skulltaker and a Ren Master and some Bloodletters, you can now actually get around damage having better than the Master of Executions, which actually just kind of shows you how much things change this slate.
I don't think the Master of Executions is particularly still bad. Like, he still is damage 3,
He's good.
but
He's good. And
he's
he still
definitely
gets...
not what he was.
No.
Which, again, probably for the best. Like, that, like, again, I'm okay with that guy getting hit. It was the other stuff that got hit here that's weird, right? Like, that guy definitely deserved it, but Favorite of Khorne was probably fine, is kind of my...
Yeah,
it was Angron
Yeah.
that needed the points increase. The World Eater's Demon Prince, like, I don't think that 120 Jackals Whip was amazing. I'm kind of glad it doesn't get to continue to exist in the same capacity. It was not a particularly World Eater.
Yeah, that one I don't think it was necessary, but
that list was dumb, but that change also was not necessary.
For sure. So that is the balanced data slate. Notably, no Necron changes, as we covered earlier. Is there anything that's not here that you thought would be? Anything that didn't get removed that you thought should have been?
I'll be honest, I thought they were going to make the Vect and the CP regen double strats like battle tactic. I thought they were going to make like another pass on that and make that a little bit less clunky.
that would be nice, because that was definitely a change that wasn't particularly well implemented or thought out, especially with the knock-on effect that it had for armies that have no battle tactics.
Yeah, it felt very hasty. Like, it was kind of like, hey, the data slate is going to print, and then we realized in the 11th hour that we need to address this, and like, let's get something down quickly rather than missing our window. That's what it felt like.
Yep. I don't know. We'll see what happens. There could be updates and changes to this that they have in the plans. Maybe they're doing a rework of all of that.
Yeah, I mean,
we'll find out in time.
For all we know, when the new mission pack comes out with the commentary, companion, whatever, like, it might just slide in there.
Maybe we'll go back to 12 starring CP.
Be nice.
Okay, right. Next up we have the generalized index cards update. So there are a bunch of updates to some small data sheets in here. This one I don't believe has the plus thing next to it, so it's just
it just has the red, but the red is actually changes that happened.
Yeah. So that guy has a melee weapon now.
Agents of the Imperium. You skipped over that.
Wait, what?
We had already. Yes, you can now legally run an agent's army because you don't have to select an attachment. Oh my goodness, that's
one it is.
Care about, right?
That one guy at LVO no longer has to rely on charity from the TO.
Yeah.
Okay.
You now know. So for anyone who doesn't want to go and read it, basically, if you select armies, Agents of the Imperium as your army, you can skip the select detachment step, because if not, technically your army was illegal, but no one really cared because you were running agents.
And the app would let you do it, so it doesn't matter. Okay, Warp Surge now affects units that charge when they advanced. I'm pretty sure that's what it did already. I think that's just a wording cleanup. Plasma Pistol in there. The leader stuff for all the characters. I think this is all
no. So the thing is that one right there, that one's kind of a weird one. Oh, I don't have the old wording on it now anymore. Oops. If I remember correctly, there was a weird wording about this that allowed you to do like because I think it just said you were eligible to charge, and so it would do something weird like allow you to like fall back and charge.
Oh, okay. So
I can't remember exactly. It was a weird one, but it was just a clarification that cleaned up the application of that.
This is broadly, I think this is mostly just they removed company heroes from Ezekiel and Asmodee again because you could technically attach them to it and immediately kill them. And other than that, and then changing like the Deathwing Terminator Squad to be the way that Belial's character actually works now. Nothing particularly interesting there. Spectre's kill teams. They now can go back into reserve if they're at stage 6. I don't think that's much of a change. Drago now, so this is one of the first like properly interesting ones. Drago now gets +2 to charge when he comes in through teleport assault, which is the going back into reserve at the end of your opponent's turn rule. You don't have to deep strike Drago in order to get +2 to charge. This is a big quality of life change to Drago's playability and makes him much more flexible in terms of starting on the board, wandering around, and then going back into reserve and using it later in the game rather than being forced to use it by turn 3.
It also means you can do a turn 1 6-inch charge with him.
Yes,
because you couldn't do that before unless your opponent had triggered missed a Deimos on him.
Yep. Which was a very, relying on your opponent to give you anything is kind of Grey Knight's army special rule between Mr. Deimos and Sigil of Exigence, but it's nice to have something that you can do on your own agency.
Yep.
Nexus can only move your own ambush tokens now, which frankly heartbreaking.
Look, if you're in the GSE mirror anyways, that game's already probably fairly cursed in terms of figuring out who's doing what, but
I like that this is in the data sheet. I didn't even consider that, and I like that this is in there because that means it happens somewhere.
I don't know what this
that
is
question.
From.
He got his second big shoot, twin big shooter.
Okay.
He only had one twin big shooter before.
Good for him.
And he went down points. I'm sure he's broken now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah,
okay, so this is the other big buff to Space Wolves, is a whole lot of their war gear and attacks and everything else was just wrong or different for no reason from the same Marine equivalent. So they've just fixed it all. Either the right attack characteristic, the right strength, AP, whatever. The one thing that I had a good chuckle at is the Wolfguard Terminators and the Pack Leader. They had a build where you could give them no melee weapon at all. So you could give them a Storm Shield and a Storm Bolter. And they had no close combat weapon. So if they charged, they just sat there.
You could give them a Storm Shield and a Storm Shield, but...
You can't do that. They did actually fix that particular one.
Okay.
And yeah, so they now by default both have a close combat weapon that has something. I think it's
a melee profile. Yep. 3 attacks at 401. Big value on your Terminators is exactly what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But more interestingly, Wolfen are now strength 6 instead of strength 5. Damage 2 instead of damage 1 on the Thunderhammer profile only. So they are 6-1-2 with 4 attacks to hit on 3s. But they are dirt cheap. I don't know if it's enough, but it's definitely interesting.
Like they're 80 points for 5?
Yep.
They have a 6 up Feel of Pain. They still have 2 wounds. They'll have the invuln because
Storm Shield, yep.
It's not bad.
It's not the most interesting profile in the world, but it has a role and might be more viable. Like there is a use case for these now, whereas at the moment they kind of suck.
How would 30 Wolfen look like in like
Gladius, I assume, for Lance and +1 AP? Or Stormlance, maybe?
I think Stormlance would be more interesting for them.
I mean, you still get the advance in charge. Like, they're not going in transport, so the advance in charge off of Gladius is pretty much the same thing as in Stormlance, but
yeah,
it definitely gives them some options. I think this seems fine. Stormlance has worse stratagems, but has always on advance in charge. Gladius has once per game advance in charge, but much more usable stratagems.
You probably only react once. You also fall back in charge with them. Actually, Stormlance has that as well, doesn't it?
Stormlance has that natively as well. Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is fine. It gives them a use case. They're still cheap as chips and reasonably resilient. I actually like the idea of just like 3 squads of 5. Are they still OC0 or do they have OC now?
That's a great question. I think they're still OC0. They are still OC0, and they have no way.
They're terrible objectives. Don't do that.
How do they gain OC?
Chaplain nearby?
No, they don't have that. The Death Company have that rule.
Yeah. So, yeah, don't do that. I was going to say 3 squads of 5 as objective holders might be interesting, but that's a terrible idea because they're OC0. Run them with Gulliman in an illegal list to get the +1 OC, like a Storm Raven.
One of the things to note is that they all can have an assault weapon. So,
yeah, so you can give one of them so they can like advance in action, which is fine because they get the Storm Frag grenade launcher, right? Yep. The Exalted Sorcerer on disc now has a keyword to his ability, so it's now a unit becomes bound, which means you can't double stack it per the errata we talked about earlier. Whoever was doing that to quarter their opponents have advancing charge rolls was
just 3 of them. You're now moving nothing.
Yeah.
Doesn't stop you from stacking it with a Exalted Flamer, but no one was doing that anyways.
Lord of Vikatas can now pick his own unit if he attaches to a squad to give it scout because they've changed the wording to not require you to pick a unit that doesn't have the scout keyword.
Finally, World Eater fixed.
Yep. And Nassim cannot put Exalted Event in Rhinos anymore, which nobody was doing except Nassim.
The Goonhammer article just had one line, "Fuck you, Nassim."
Okay. Anything that was missing here, particularly the lion getting his extra damage back would have been nice. Why is he damaged two? Why is he damaged one on the sweep? But other than
I
that,
mean,
I think this was
again, the
pretty.
book's not out, so they can't change it.
Yeah, I know, but it still bugs me.
I know. I
Um,
want his damage back. I want his -1 to wound back. Maybe he's 200 points in the points update.
Maybe. I don't think there's probably anything in here that I was like expecting to see. It's a lot of just like little cleanups, but it's nice to see a couple of little buffs coming through with Drago and Wolfen. Like it definitely gives
Mhm.
both of them. Like Drago was already really good, and in all Grenatless, but Grenets weren't great. So just giving them a straight buff atop the small buff to giving them an option with Nemesis Dreadites maybe helps them out. Definitely more than Thousand Suns, who got nerfed because now you can't double slow things. Ridiculous. Okay, we have one more thing to talk about, and then we will give our thoughts today. So as a whole. We
No,
are
there's nothing
almost.
else. We're done, right? That's the
Yeah,
only articles
we're
that were issued
definitely
today.
done. That was 100% it, and we do not care. Now, again, this is going to get covered, I assume, tonight on the main show, but there is a new detachment for one army. I'm surprised Demons didn't get this treatment as well. I think this would have been a more interesting way to approach it, because that detachment is kind of weird. But
Yeah.
Oh well. Kari
Massive
have,
points cuts instead.
yeah, this is like the alternative way of doing that, but doing a balance update for an army. Why not just give them more and different stuff? So, in addition to the power from pain change, where you now get the additional EP when you use it on a melee attack, there is now a new detachment called the Sky Splinter Assault, making Drukhari one of like four factions now that have more than one detachment.
5 now.
5 now, yeah.
Well, there'll be one of 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have Reign of Cruelty. If you disembark from a transport, so you have to get out your squishy bow, you now gain Ignore Cover and Lance. So Ignore Cover for your ranged weapons and Lance for your melee weapons. So a reasonable increase in damage output for basically any unit that gets out of a transport, but it does only help units in transports. Now, compared to the original detachment, which gave you extra pain tokens that were basically unlimited anyway because you ran a Chronos, this is really good. But it does have the caveat of you have to get out your bow, which means there are some form of limitations.
But now they have a melee buff to their army.
Yep. Drukhari can now. So basically, from the previous, you can now have +1 AP and Lance, and also an Archon giving you full wound rerolls on your Incubi, which is a lot of stats.
That right there just
The enhancements, I was not massively impressed with 3 of them, but the last one pays all. So you can have a 6-inch aura of benefit of cover and stealth. This is an aura of stealth, which is
That's
fine,
not an aura.
exciting.
It just applies to the bears unit.
Oh, only applies to the bears
They
unit?
have to be
That's
wholly
really
within
sad.
6 of the transport, and then they get stealth
That's really crap.
and benefit of cover.
You can get empower a transport with a pain token. You will take this if you have points. If you do not, you will not. A little bit of economy on it is nice, but Chronos with their 4 up to regenerate pain tokens basically keeps you topped up at all times. I feel
This
like
basically is I'm at 1990 and I want to be at 2000 or 1985. I can't remember what the points on this is.
Yeah.
I think it's 10.
You can get an extra pain token whenever you kill a unit with the bearer's unit, which again, if you have the points, there's no reason not to. And then the one that actually works, or that you actually care about, the Nightmare Shroud gives the bearer and his unit immunity to Overwatch on the turn they disembark from a transport.
Oh baby.
Yeah. Cult of Strife, but now you don't have to spend CP for it.
People were playing Orc Commandos, a pretty terrible data sheet just for this ability to close and wrap and tag things. Combine that with like 10 Incubi with an Archon, for example.
Oh baby.
Yeah, this is really good.
And then
I think Incubi and Archon will be what you'll see it on, but I could see a lot of places that you could potentially look at putting this.
When they have a new feature in the official app that when you select this detachment, this enhancement auto populates into the list before you even select any characters.
Yeah, it just goes on an Archon. It just puts an Archon and 10 Incubi on your list with this and a Radar. And it's just like, cool, that's your start. And then you can figure out the rest yourself. Yeah. And the stratagem wise, I think they're broadly fine. There's like one or two really good ones and a lot of like
really
okay
good ones.
Yeah. So Vicious Blades is basically like a pseudo grenade stratagem. If a transport fights in combat, you can roll 1 dice for every model embarked in the transport, or on a 5-up or a 4-up if it's Rax, you do a mortal wound to a cap of 4. You can combine this with like tank shock to do a reasonable amount of damage of mortal wounds with a transport. It's still kind of weird to be charging with a transport, but it's fine.
Yeah, but they're also Drukhari transports. Drukhari transports are meant to be like dipping and diving and weaving in there. They've got the prows and the blades, and it's thematically cool.
Yeah, it's vaguely more useful. You do like there is an ability to do more wounds with this, which is fine. Like you're never going to be upset about having access to the stratagem. Wraith-like Retreat allows a Drakari infantry unit that fought this phase to make a normal move. If it's a Witch unit, it can go wherever it wants. If it's not, it must end the move within range to embark in a transport. And then it embarks in that transport.
They can also fall back.
Option to have. Yeah, you can fall back with a normal or fallback move. Great for things like Grotesques, for Archon and Incubi, all that kind of stuff that just wants to not get shot to bits. Allows you to re-trigger that disembark from a transport ability for Lance and ignore and immunity to Overwatch and all that kind of thing. Just very, very solid little ability. It is end of the fight phase, so if you were in combat, you are going to get hit before you can use it. You're not just dipping out completely.
And you do have to have fought.
Yeah,
you do have to
that prevents you from coming down and unsticking objectives and then hopping back in for free.
Yeah.
Which you can already do with a Venom, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Just notably, this detachment doesn't have Fire and Fade, so this is the only like movement shenanigans that you've got. It's the only other detachment currently present without Fire and Fade. Pounce on the Prey basically gives you assault ramp as if you were a Land Raider, so you can move the transport forward, get the guys out, and then charge. It's restricted to only one transport doing it, so you're not seeing anything like, you know, we might have been worried about that they gave this as like a generic detachment rule for something, but you can have one unit that goes very fast and does a lot of damage. Again, you will see this used.
Oh, it targets the infantry unit, not the transport. I just had a funny thought about the Tantalus, but I just saw the target. It targets
they were very careful about this.
I was like, ooh, they mess up, but no, they target the infantry unit, not the transport.
No, they were smart about that.
Yeah. There is a very reasonably solid shooting output stratagem. It gives you sustained hits 1 if you disembark from a transport, and sustained hits 2 if you're Cabalite Warriors. I don't think this is the biggest impact because there's just not a lot of units that have a ton of damage output disembark from a transport.
No, but it's like it's a blaster, a blast pistol, and a dark lance with full rerolls to hit from just being empowered. And you know, if you get the 6s, you get the 6s. It's a CP to fish.
Yeah, and again, though, it comes with the restriction that you do have to get out of your safety.
Yeah, which you then just get back in at the end of the turn because you just got out of a Venom.
Yeah, but then you're using this in a 5-model squad rather than a 10-model squad. Like, there's lots of little trade-offs in back. It's a fine strategy.
There's push pull here, which I'm fine with.
Swooping Mockery. This is the normal move when somebody ends with a 9 of a transport. Your transport can move 6. When your opponent ends a normal advance or fallback move, just a nice little stratagem to have access to.
Some reactive move.
And then a unexciting but fine stratagem to have access to, reactive 4 from vulnerable save when you're targeted with a shooting attack. You will never complain to have this. It's quite funny on some of the more resilient stuff like Void Ravens and Tantaluses. And
extremely funny on a Tantalus.
Talos are vehicles now, right? No, they're still monsters. I think they're monsters.
So. They are monsters, yeah.
Yeah,
they shouldn't be vehicles.
You're using this on like, this is you. I really need this Venom to be alive to score me primary kind of thing. Blah blah blah. It's fine. Or I want this Venom to live an extra shot so that he has to shoot the guys that has to shoot the Venom a second time rather than the guys who go out. You'll never be upset to have it, but I don't think you'll use this a ton because you are.
Or even just on a Raider, because the Raider only has a 6-up invuln.
Yeah,
so you can flip that like, all right, I've got 10 wounds here that you have to chew through. You've targeted me with, you have 3 things that can shoot at me. Let's see what happens. Red Run, we will be doing a show like at our regular slot. This is just going through and digesting the slate as we go. Like we spent a little bit of time to read this ahead of time, and now we're just going and vamping.
Yeah. So I think this is a very interesting detachment. I don't know how it's going to land in terms of the overall scope of the game, but it's a much more interesting detachment than Real Space Raiders. It is probably reasonably strong.
I think it's quite strong when combined with the point decreases that Drakari got. And just like being able to run like 5-6 Venoms with stuff inside that's just bouncing around constantly. And like a Venom with 5 Incubi and an Archon in it is now a threat that you have to respect.
Yeah, for sure.
Like before Incubi, you didn't really care about, but now that they have +1 to wound and full hit and wound rerolls for no CP, just a pain token, which they'll refund back if they kill the thing they're swinging at, is really good.
Before, you were basically just kind of bunkering down, and you pushed forward enough where they had to come out and contest your push to the midfield, but you were basically just trying to survive that initial alpha or beta strike from the Ravagers and the Void Ravens, and then if you could survive that and you had an army left over, they folded like a lawn chair. Whereas now that's still a thing. They still have full rerolls on lances that will be supporting them, but now you have they can stage up a a raider, and you can push aggressively, try to cut angles to it, and you're basically all inning on the fact that you can kill that and then kill what's inside, so that way they don't punish you for pushing up and getting these aggressive angles. But now they reactive move. Now they have a 4-up invuln. When they move the next turn, now they have assault ramps with the Archon and Incubi that now you can't overwatch, and now have an extra AP and they have an extra lance. It's a complete dynamic change of this army and how it plays. I'm getting some echoes of Ninth Edition. I'm hoping it won't be quite that level, but it's going to play more like that style.
Yeah, it's very interesting on things that also things that can shoot and charge. So even just stuff like a Kabalite squad with an Archon, because you might have a spare Archon because you put Drazar with one of your Incubi squads. You come out, you get full hit rerolls. You have ignore cover, you shoot, you charge, you get full wound rerolls with lance and +1 AP. Like that's a completely reasonable. Like you're not gonna kill everything, but you're going to get ton on 5s with full rerolls. Like you're gonna make him take a bunch of saves with your regular random idiots.
Yeah, could see some experimentation with like MSU grotesque squads with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, or even maximal grotesque squads. I don't know what
Or
the grotesque shooting profile is like. I don't think it's amazing. As I scroll
Oh
down
my
to
god! Sorry, I just got completely distracted. Keep going.
Do they? I think grotesque naturally have ignore cover. Why am I not just searching? Like I think grotesque have. Yeah, they don't have ignore cover on their flamers. So like you disembark a squad of 6 grotesques, you fire your liquefire guns with ignore covers and torrent, and then you charge in with lance on your 5-1-2 attacks that now have +1 AP and full reroll to hit. Right, like that's exactly the kind of thing that's going to just give you a new option of a thing to do. Like Drazar doesn't synergize amazingly with this detachment because he naturally gives his squad +1 to wound, but he's still fine. You could run him unattached now and just use him as like a pseudo lone operative. That's fine.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I like the idea of just running him solo, to be honest. Does his points go down?
No.
I think he went down.
No, he went down like 5 or 10.
Yeah, like
I could see.
Very,
I can see him solo.
Yeah, I could see him solo. I could see some matchups just putting him within a squad.
Yeah, Grower points a point though that
yeah.
The Grots count as 3 models, I think, in a transport, so you could only do the big squad and the Tantalus.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking the MSU squads.
Yeah, you do like 3s and raiders. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's definitely some play there for like three mans out of raiders.
Yeah, and then even just stuff like racks, like they have a reasonable little bit of shooting that gets ignore cover suddenly, and then +1 to wound is a very, very reasonable thing to just have access to.
They also have that very silly buff on the mortal wound strat with the transport.
Yes, which is very, very interesting. And then you
Beastmasters. Now that's a fun unit.
The main thing to think about here is like, what are you actually losing, right? None of this is particularly amazing, like in terms of like the general detachment that you have already. Like this is garbage for the free paint tokens that you're getting at the beginning. The enhancements all kind of suck. Like you'll run the Art of Pain because you might as well. And then the stratagems, the wound reroll stratagem is admittedly very reasonable. The witch stratagem is not that amazing. Like you maybe see it on like Lilith occasionally. Fire and Fade, obviously a fantastic stratagem. And then then you have like -1 to wound for Talos, so you're going to have a little bit less resilience if you're trying to run units that aren't in transports, and then -1 to hit for non-homogeneous units, and then a garbage thing with more pain tokens. So you're losing a bit of resilience on your units once they're out of transports, but you have a lot more damage on the front end. Drukhari are an army that kind of like this encourages very much more the glass cannon play style. I think if you were going to try and play like the 6 Talos build that Scary was playing recently, like you probably still stick with the original detachment because the -1 to wound is a very big game for that. But like Talos went down a little bit. There's a very reasonable path in there, but overall, if you want a more dynamic option, then the new detachment is significantly more appealing for that.
If you got into Drukhari because of their playstyle in 9th edition, I think you'll be very, very happy with these changes.
Yeah. Notably, though, I don't think this is Eldar. I don't think this is Necrons. It's going to debut somewhere in the like an army that is interesting that you have to work to play against, but nothing in here screams like I'm going to win every super major for the next 3 months.
You still get to play the game versus them.
Yeah. And like if you kill the transports, which are very fragile models, like they lose all their abilities. Like everything just goes away. You go second against like 3 mana cores, 3 basilisks, and they just like demech 4 transports. You're just gonna be like, oh, I don't know what I do now. So
yeah,
Manticores are real pricey now. So
yeah, that opens up an interesting push pull in like for the Drukhari players' perspective for list building. It's like, well, do I run the bear minimum amount of transports and have more stuff and have more efficiency. But now, like, I'm not very reliable because if I lose like 1 or 2 transports or 3, all of a sudden, like, I lose critical mass of my rules. Or do you go like heavier in transports and like heavier in MSU, just so that way you have multiple cycling of disembark, re-embark, that kind of stuff. So interesting push pulls there, which is usually a sign of well thought out rules.
Yeah, I really like this attachment. It seems
Yep.
very good.
The thing I'll also add here is that, like, this is huge from GW. This is a brand new detachment to balance an army that's been struggling and hasn't really been interesting to play outside of a codex.
I would not be surprised if this was a codex detachment brought forward, but
I mean, we know
we'll
what the
see.
next like 6 codexes are, and they're not in there. So that means that like they pulled this way forward.
Yeah.
If they did do that, or they wrote this for them as the, this will end up being a codex detachment, but we didn't have this and we wanted to do something different.
Yeah. This is nice, and I honestly am kind of emboldened, like I like to encourage this sort of thing because the codex release cycles
It's
been
long.
pretty slow. It's been long and it's been slow. It feels like meta changes are being defined by the MFMs and data slates more than actual codexes hitting the meta. It's been a trickle.
I think there's a very real argument for, like, we've now seen like 4 different ways of balancing a struggling faction, in the sense that we've had Votan, which was we'll change one of their fundamental mechanics by just making it more accessible. We've had Death Guard, which was we'll rewrite one of their core mechanics. We've had Demons, which is basically we will drop the points on literally everything and see if it works. And then we've had now Drakari, which is we'll give them a new attachment. And I think in 3 to 6 months' time, we'll probably start seeing a lot more of one of them as a balancing tool than we'll see the others. And I'm interested to see where it nets out in terms of that.
Or they just keep using all of them.
Or if they keep using all of them, yeah, because it might turn out that like this one is too much work and they're not willing to do it, or that the Demons one isn't efficient, doesn't work because all it did was make a bunch of allies options new and interesting and things like that. There's lots of ways that all of this information could go, but definitely like keep giving the feedback of which ones you like seeing. I am willing to bet that everybody would rather be this and spread the sickness than Votan and Votan and Demons.
Yes, Donald. Dark Elder do have 2 detachments now. They have Real Space Raiders, and then they have the Sky Splinter Assault.
I think you'll see them playing almost exclusively Sky Splinter Assault now.
Yeah, it seems more powerful,
Probably,
and it seems more fun and dynamic.
That's the biggest thing. It just seems more fun to play, and for players that came into Drakari in 9th, it plays a lot more like they played in 9th than the current Alliance of Agony or whatever it's called.
Yeah, Real Space Raiders, which is just
third edition Darkland spam.
Yeah, like if you came up in like the early editions with Drakari, what they had before this felt comfortable.
Yeah, I'm very glad to see them lose the -1 to wound stratagem. I was sick of playing against that. I hate playing against Talos.
Well, you also probably won't
Just
see too many
die.
Talos or Chronos in that list anyways, because they don't benefit from anything else.
You'll see like at least, I think you'll see 2
You'll
Chronos
see
in it.
at least 1 Chronos.
You'll see the Chronos,
think-
yes, but like you're not going to see like 3x2 Talos like you do in the current detachment.
You'll probably end up running more Chronos in this detachment than the other one because it just has less mechanics for generating pain tokens than the other one does. So you're probably more incentivized.
I can see 2 gives you like some really nice coverage.
I think
just
two
because
is
you're much more encouraged to spread out with this army, right? Like you're playing transports.
They also make a fantastic backfield holder because a Chronos behind a wall is not dying anytime quickly to do it indirect.
They are really annoying to kill.
But yeah, it's good, and also it's more holes. Like when at the end of the day, like Raiders and Venoms are not that tough, but they are still vehicles at the end of the day. And if you're shooting them, then they probably are not shooting at your Chronos, especially if it's behind a wall.
Cool. So that is the end. I think that is everything that came out. We have covered in some capacity. I think what we're going to do to finish off is we're just going to have everybody do their top winner, top loser, and what they're most excited about playing next, which can be slightly different to those things. So, Jeremy, do you want to start us off with your biggest winner from the data slate?
Drakari. I don't think there's any question about it. Between the new detachment and the point decreases, like they were just on the edge of being like decent. And now they just have an entire new way of playing the army. And then second after that is probably Demons.
Yep.
That's fair. Tim?
I'm going to narrow my scope here a little bit and just comment on Chaos factions. I think far and away by Chaos, Demons are the winners. I think World Eaters are far and away the biggest losers for Chaos. And I think Death Guard and Death Guard are number 2 as far as like, because it was like kind of like reshuffling a little bit, rebalancing. And then I think CSM are still very viable, but I think CSM, CK, and Thousand Suns are all kind of trying to figure out who's the number 3.
That's fair. As for myself, I think the biggest winner is Necrons, obviously. They're the one that stands the most to gain from not much else coming up to the level that they're at. As far as things that actually changed, I think Custodians make out pretty well from this with the Devastating Wound change and a lot of points reductions. And as Tim said, yeah, Demons make out very, very well from this. Black Templars also being another one that probably catches like a big improvement from nobody else really coming up to the level of like where they're at. Like that Ironstorm build is still very powerful. So is like Swordbreather and Gladius. It does not lose a whole lot. Jeremy, biggest loser?
Probably CSM. I think that they got hit maybe a little bit harder than they needed to be. But it'll be interesting because it's not like it's not a reasonably deep codex or index, and their codex is also 4th or 5th in line, or 3rd or 4th in line right now.
It's coming pretty soon.
Yeah, so that might offset some of that. After that, World Eaters for sure, because Jesus.
Yeah, I think CSM still has some room to pivot, because both CSM and World Eaters, it felt like someone took aim at a specific list, whereas CSM has, a suboptimal list that they can pivot to, whereas World Eaters just kind of doesn't.
Let's go Abaddon, my hero. Yeah, and then to finish up on that, yeah, along with World Eaters and Chaos Space Marines, Eldar are obviously pretty big losers to Dataslate. A lot of their like armies that have options into them. I don't think they're a big loser in the sense that like I think Eldar are going to be unplayable. I think they'll still sit in the top 8 for
They
multiplayer.
escaped major point hikes. Like they got point hikes before, but like people were still taking tons of stuff that didn't get touched this time around.
I think
for sure.
And so like a lot of the MSU builds are basically unaffected.
Losing half of your fate dice, the board control of Night Spinners, and the ability to Unicron Pokeball people is like with the same capacity is very, very damning for that army. I think Eldar will make out like the sum of their nerfs will be less than the individual like impact of every individual one, because you'll just stop playing Wraithguard and you'll maybe stop playing the Incarn and you'll play other things. But those other things are a much more. You're not playing like Custodies with extra steps with the Eldar now, where you're playing like 2 unkillable units with the Incarn and I say unkillable, right? Where you're playing like this like very durable core. You'll now see, you'll maybe play some more walkers and some spiders and some specters and some spy, and like you'll play a little bit of everything now, and you'll maybe go into more like wave serpents and falcons and troops and all this stuff that's just a more fragile and has more counterplay. And there are lots of armies that are good at playing into that kind of style, which even if Eldar remains similar on power level, there is more counterplay to that because there's less chance of you just getting Eldar now, because you're not just going to get dice scammed by them to the same degree.
Eldar is going to end up looking kind of like how it did like at the end of 9th edition, I think, those stout lists. So you'll see like that kind of stuff come back where it's like bikes, Wind Riders, Shroudrunners, Warwalkers. I think Wraith Lords are still viable with or without Spirit Seer. I still like that combo. I could see an Avatar. I know in a world where everyone's gearing up to kill Catan, like taking an Avatar feels a little bit sketchy, but having a 2-up save and -1 to wound is a far cry between, just being T11, 4-up, 5-up.
Yeah. I think the Avatar suffers a lot from like the big model suffered the most from the change in fate dice, where it's just harder to justify using them on them. But also you get more impact out of them individually. So there's like as always pushing the. I think a lot of the time you'll find fate dice for charges and 6 damage now. But
at the end of the day, like you can be as tricksy and as mobile as you want, but if you don't have a way to contest someone shoving the midfield, like you're kind of just out of it.
Yeah, I like the idea of things like 5 Wraithguard in like a Wave Serpent as kind of an option. Not 5 Wraithguard, like Wraith Blades, that kind of thing that like doesn't rely as much on the stratagems. Didn't need Fate's Messenger. You can use like the get a miracle to get a fate dice when you kill things. You can run Guardians and Storm Guardians and all these kind of things that generate fate dice. Like, there's lots of options there for Eldar, but I think it would be disingenuous to say that they weren't at least in the top 3 hardest hit factions.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you building next? What lists have you been building already?
I gotta finish painting Morty. I have one built and then on a custom paint. It's blurry, Jeremy.
I know. I'm trying to fix it.
Oh,
it's small.
Yeah, I think I gotta finish building my Lancer because I kind of want to mess around with the a Lancer plus War Dogs.
Lancer gives assault.
It gives advance and shoot to War Dogs within 6 inches, which is
Gets interesting with
Really good.
leash.
That's good. It pretty much wounds everything in the game on 2s, unless you have -1 to wound, and it gives you access to double tank shock, and you just have a 4-pin bone on a big guy. So, and I just really want an excuse not to run stalkers anymore. I just hate that data sheet. And then for Death Guard, I kind of have everything, but like I said, Morty. We're cutting brigands, I think, and I might mess around with double. For CK and Death Guard, I might mess around with double red cleanser Morax. I think there's something cute there, and also I kind of want to mess around with Predator Destructors because I think that's just a really good data sheet that's being slept on.
Yeah, I bought a bunch of demon stuff. I picked up like Signal Blood Crushers and a Skull Cannon to convert into a Blood Throne. Gonna give them a play about with, but I'm also very excited to go and give some Nids a try with some of the changes. I think Nids mostly benefit from rules changes, but some of the points drops are nice in there as well. There's lots of things to have a play about with. Plus, Wraithguard dying is very, very big deal for being able to play monsters reasonably.
Pure Corn Demon List actually sounds like really fun right now.
Yeah,
I kind of want to. I might try that in RTT. Just run Pure Corn Demons.
Yeah. I drafted up a very initial first pass at Nids is one of the first things. Demons is the first thing I wrote, which was like Bellacore Scarbrand, 18 Blood Crushers, 2 Red Masters, 2x5 Flesh Hounds, and then 1 squad of Plague Bearers, 3 squads of Nurglings just to fill it out because scoring is nice to have sometimes, and that feels like a lot of stuff to put on the table for 2,000 points. So yeah, very excited to see what kind of direction you can take that. Right, I think that is us. So that's been our Dataslate breakdown, review, ramble, argue, all the variable good things that you come to StatCheck for. Tim has been from X1. Thank you, Tim, for joining us for this bonus content episode. Check out X1 every month on whatever date they put it on because it's a little bit variable at the moment. And look forward to them coming back to hopefully a more structured schedule after WTC when their time opens up a little more. And if you want to catch the main show, check us out tonight in 3.5 hours, 11 PST, 11 UK, 6 EST, where we'll be back to do even more of this and talk about a bunch of other stuff and have Anthony and hopefully Nathan's thoughts on Drukhari and World Eaters and all the things in between. We will probably be directing the main show back to come and watching the VOD for this one as well because we had a lot of coverage on the Balance Dataslate today. Thank you to Goonhammer for putting together a bunch of resources. Thank you to Jeremy for putting together the points comparison document and all that good stuff. We'll do the plugs in the main show. I'm not doing them here on bonus content. Have a great afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go eat some dinner and then start writing lists because I'm playing games tomorrow. It's going to be great.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Oh, Jeremy, don't do Nathan's thing.